I was at school thinking that awakened people were very weak in this era, and that was because the world was too peaceful. Some students who were just a little stronger used that to intimidate the others and steal their money. I didn't remember who this bully was, but his arrogance was so big that he didn't even respect the teachers. The bully got annoyed when I got in his way and shoved me. Later, the teacher said she had high expectations for me. When I went through the awakening room to find out which element I had, I got a huge surprise. It was all of them. And every time I level up an element, I get a new random class. That was ridiculous. The infinite awakening power. But my starting points were all at 0. I needed to choose my first class carefully. So when I left the room, the other students accused me of taking too long inside. Teacher Huang was excited, so I killed the mood and told her my class was Core Warrior, an awful class. I expected to be mocked by him and told that I should accept failure, but the teacher had a heart even bigger than her boobs. She said effort is more important. The bully from earlier showed up again and said in front of everyone that this speech was fake. He said the teacher should know better because she has mediocre talent and that's why she is just a teacher. For the first time I was furious, but the teacher accepted being insulted in front of everyone. The student explained that your class level will decide the rest of your life, and the weak with bad talents are just trash. When he said she could do well in life if she did favors for someone powerful like him, I gave up just watching and crushed the cup in the bully's hand. Maybe this soda will cool this idiot's head, I said out loud. Hong Qiangsheng was a natural talent who didn't even need to use the awakening room. He attacked me without caring about my life. Not even the teacher could save me in time, but I kept my cool and blocked the attack using a blocking skill. The bully's face changed in seconds. The attack was completely reflected, and his arm was destroyed. Qiangsheng was thrown meters backward. It was a crushing defeat. How is this possible? I didn't even understand what happened here, thought the small-brained bully. Everyone was shocked by the scene. The weak boy Bai Yi now looked like a completely different person. His power and confidence were visible. The teacher was the most shocked person there. She saw it happen and knew that the exclusive ability of the warrior class, Material Perception, is elite level. It blocks 100% of incoming damage and reflects it back to the enemy in 0.09 seconds. Not even elite warriors fully master that. The hidden truth that nobody knows is darker than anyone could imagine. The truth is that Bai Yi had gone back 20 years into the past. Bai Yi is not a child. He is a man who lived every second of the last 10 years leading the strongest awakened team in the world, the Divine Squad. His mission is to eradicate demonic lairs in the name of the highest authority, known as God. This is the 100th high-level lair the Divine Squad faces. Among the members of the Divine Squad is He Li, the Lightning Assassin. This mission, classified as a Rank L Purification, the maximum difficulty level, makes her presence crucial for victory. The team also includes Han Xiaolin, the Cloud Mage. Despite the extreme difficulty, Bai Yi, the leader, believes that after this mission, he can finally take a vacation. The group's support is Lucien, the Star Maestro, whose ability allows him to amplify gravity up to 100 times, enhancing attacks. Bai Yi himself, known as the Sacred Swordsman, uses his ability, the annihilation of 10 domains. It's no wonder he leads such a powerful team. Together, they complete another mission, eliminating the SSS rank Demon King Belphegor. Han Xiaolin comments that the mission ended too quickly, and that he would have liked to have enjoyed it more. Lucian observes that being a top priority mission that required the entire team, didn't it seem dangerously easy? Bai Yi replies that the information indicated the Demon King was special, possessing 5 elements and a secret ability. He Lo approaches Bai Yi and asks if they will really take a vacation. She expresses a desire to go on a date with him, but Bai Yi replies that everyone will go together to their usual spot to celebrate. He laments that her technique didn't work again. Next, Bai Yi mentions that one of his colleagues did not show up for the mission. Lucian explains that the absent member had said he would take care of the remains, but did not appear during the fight. Hilo complains that this always happens, and that the captain should be stricter about absences. At that moment, someone stealthily appears at the location and activates a purification mission. The individual attacks the group, and Han Xiaolin is the first to be hit. The entire team is in shock. Bai Yi tries to react, but realizes he cannot move his body. The adversary reveals that throughout the previous month, Bai Yi's coffee had been laced with paralyzing agents. Then, he uses his ability, the Forbidden Tomb, stating that to eliminate the strongest member of the group, he needed to ensure everything was perfect. The adversary, who in the past pretended to be an ally of the team, now declares that it is God's will for them to be eliminated. Next, the other members of the Divine Squad are eliminated before Bai Yi's eyes. Furious, the leader asks why his former ally is doing this and what kind of deity would order such an act. The adversary replies that his old captain remains naive and attacks Bai Yi, saying that his god needs no reasons. Bai Yi retorts that they had been together for over 10 years and that he considered him practically family. The adversary claims that Bai Yi still hasn't understood anything. He reveals that on the day they met, God was already moving the pieces and that the entire team was nothing more than pawns. That's why he pretended to be everyone's friend, just to gain their trust and catch them off guard. With that, the adversary confirms that all members of the group have been eliminated and his mission is complete. After being hit squarely, Bai Yi wakes up in a strange place. There, he encounters a mysterious being whom he recognizes as Belphegor. However, Bai Yi questions this, as the Demon King should be dead. Belphegor, the SSS rank Demon King, states that he would not die so easily. He explains that this is his spiritual space and that the entire realm of Naya is his true vital essence. Getting straight to the point, Belphegor proposes a deal to Bai Yi. He reveals that his special ability, Return of Life, allows him to send someone to the past, granting them the chance to correct mistakes. Then he asks, wouldn't Bai Yi like to do that? Bai Yi, the team leader, thinks of his companions and recalls the good times they spent together. He concludes that all of this was taken from him by a traitor, and now he desires revenge. Thus, Bai Yi declares that he will eliminate the traitor and all the gods he claims to serve. Belphegor accepts Bai Yi's answer, asking him to consider it a welcome gift. However, Bai Yi, not being naive, asks what the price of this deal is. The Demon King merely smiles at the question. Next, Bai Yi wakes up. He has returned to the year 2105 in the Holy Kingdom of He, a vassal state of Jiang. Bai Yi realizes that he has indeed gone back in time, as he is in elementary school. Furthermore, at this time, he had not yet awakened his powers, being just a child. The elementary school teacher reprimanded Bai Yi, noting that he, always sloppy, was now sleeping during her explanation. As punishment, she put him in detention. Bai Yi was still in shock, stunned by the reality of having traveled back in time. He saw faces he hadn't seen in over 20 years, and the situation seemed completely surreal. Despite everything, the class continued, led by teacher Huang. She explained that, in that world, there were 5 types of elemental powers: lightning, flower, cloud, core, and stellar. However, each individual could only manifest one of these elements in their body. The teacher demonstrated that her own power came from the rarest element, cloud. Depending on how the element fused with an individual's body, powers were divided into 3 categories: combat, utility, and special. When the 5 elements were combined, they became even more powerful, as exemplified by the school's strongest guild. The teacher stated that her students stood out among billions of people for being potential awakeners, and for that reason, they were flattered since childhood. However, she warned that the real challenge began that day, as there were about 100 other classes of students with the same potential as them. Classes were divided into 4 qualities: dust, firefly, abyss, and celestial light, and each of them would have only one chance to awaken their class. That afternoon, at the moment of definition, the result of this process would determine each person's place in the world. As soon as the class ended, she announced that it was her class's turn to go through the awakening process. She advised them to remain calm to avoid getting hurt. For his part, Bai Yi reflected that there were 2 known ways to awaken. The first was natural awakening, as had happened with Hong Qiangsheng. Generally, it happened to people with excellent constitution and talent. At some point of extreme emotion, the awakening occurred on its own. The second was through the awakening space room, a product of the intelligence of countless scientists. Inside, a person's adrenaline and emotions were intensified to the maximum. This induced awakening among potential candidates. However, each person could only awaken once, and the result was always random. Therefore, changing classes was also seen as the only chance to change one's destiny. After some students went through the process, it was Bai Yi's turn. He had before him the opportunity to select any quality, element, or profession, including the rarest and most special ones. Bai Yi recalled the gift the Demon King had granted him. Now he understood. It was the power of infinite awakening. The system warned that after choosing the initial profession, all elemental bars would be reset, requiring a cautious decision. After making his choice, Bai Yi finally left the room. So, he was humiliated by the bully, and got angry when even the teacher with incredible proportions was humiliated too. He just defended himself against the senior student's attack. With just his defense, he dealt so much damage to the bully. To everyone's surprise, Bai Yi revealed that he chose the core warrior profession because it already came with an initial sword of good attributes. To everyone's surprise, Bai Yi revealed that he chose the core warrior profession because it already came with an initial sword of good attributes. After getting up, Hong Changsheng claimed that the boy had only been lucky, but guaranteed that it wouldn't happen again, because unlike the brat, he possessed a truly powerful class, which placed him on a superior level. Observing all of this, Teacher Huang thought that what she had seen was not mere luck. After all, she had witnessed with her own eyes her student blocking the blow at the exact moment he was about to be hit. And then, he retaliated the attack with precision, something that even she, as a teacher, wouldn't be able to do. Furthermore, there was the fact that her student had awakened just a few minutes ago. Someone with little combat experience shouldn't be capable of such a feat. So, she wondered how Bai Yi had managed it. Back in the fight, Hong Changsheng declared that the boy should bear the consequences of his actions and that he would teach him his place in the world. In turn, Bai Yi thought that choosing the weakest class was a mistake for those who didn't possess the knowledge he had, which was why the others were shocked. But since he came from the future, he knew very well the attributes and qualities of all classes, including the one he had chosen. Some students questioned if the fight would actually happen, as using powers to duel at school was strictly forbidden. They believed that Hong Changsheng acted with such arrogance only because he was the son of an influential government figure and the school principal's nephew. On the other hand, Bai Yi was seen as a nobody, and many imagined that he might even be expelled. The teacher, aware of the situation, tried to appease the spirits and calm the students. However, the bully had no intention of letting things go. He declared that even if Bai Yi knelt and begged for forgiveness, he would not stop punishing him. Meanwhile, Bai Yi pondered that the difference between the qualities of the classes lay in the attribute bonuses, which were entirely distinct. In dust quality, the bonus was 100%, which meant that the values remained unchanged. The same profession in firefly quality received 150%. In abyss quality, the percentage was 200%. At the moment of awakening, abyss-level professions already possessed double the attributes of dust-level ones. This disparity in power, he knew, was an insurmountable chasm. Knowing this, the nerdy student thought that Bai Yi was in trouble, as he was clearly inferior to the bully. He wondered why Bai Yi had decided to confront someone so superior to his newly awakened abilities. The student reflected that the society they lived in was full of people who stepped on others whenever they could. Thus, the way to survive this was by swallowing one's pride. For him, only those who knew how to yield could resist. Confronting head-on was the most foolish choice, as it only led the individual to be even more humiliated. Back to the fight, the teacher imagined that there was no way Bai Yi could emerge unscathed. Although he had managed to block the first attack, now the opponent was applying much more force. Counting on a guaranteed victory, Hong Changsheng stated that the boy would have no way to dodge. However, Bai Yi claimed he had no intention of dodging. He used an ability called Ghost Step. In this way, the opponent passed through Bai Yi without even touching him. Not only that, but Hong Changsheng ended up injuring himself with his own knife. Even so, he blamed the protagonist, claiming that trash like Bai Yi could not win. All the other students were confused. Even Bai Yi's teacher couldn't explain what had just happened. The class representative, Chi Yin, who was also nearby, noticed that Bai Yi activated the warrior's impulse ability at the exact moment the opponent attacked. Soon after, he used the ghost ability to avoid being hit. Furthermore, with a single blow, he ended the fight and emerged unscathed. Chi Yin concluded that Bai Yi, in addition to completely mastering his class's abilities, also managed to apply them perfectly in real combat. Above all, he did everything without breaking the school rules, as it was the opponent himself who self-inflicted the injury. In turn, Bai Yi realized that this fight earned him experience and that the more enemies he defeated from then on, he would receive points to use. However, he noticed that to evolve as he wished, he would soon have to clear some dungeons. Still irritated, the bully declared that the fight was not yet over and tried to strike the protagonist from behind. However, someone arrived just in time to stop him. It was Hong Liang, the school principal and Hong Changsheng's uncle. He said that his nephew had already been shamed enough. As principal, he stated that everyone had already gone through the awakening that day and, therefore, should go home and rest. At that, the principal told Bai Yi that the school had strict rules and that he should know that. However, Bai Yi's mind was elsewhere, as he realized that returning so far in time meant that all his friends were still alive. Furthermore, on the day of his awakening in his past life, something grand had happened. Because of this, he was furious for having forgotten that event. After all, it had been the most important thing until then. Bai Yi ran off and left the principal talking to himself. Hong Liang, in turn, told the teacher to control her students better. Teacher Huang apologized, and the principal claimed that this time he would let it slide, but that it was better for it not to happen again. Once in his office, he was alone with his nephew. Hong Qiangsheng claimed that that brat was lucky, otherwise he would never have lost. However, his uncle disagreed with that statement. He claimed that the instant Hong Qiangsheng approached the boy, the latter activated an advanced ability called Ghost Step. Furthermore, in a fraction of a second, the boy aimed at the most fragile point of Hong Qiangsheng's body and completely broke his defense. Despite all this having been done with only basic abilities, the principal stated that even with 15 years of war, he doubted he could imitate what the boy did. Watching the fight, it seemed as if his nephew was a novice being humiliated by a professional player. Therefore, he stated that boy was nothing like what they imagined. Speaking of the protagonist, he ran through the city, imagining that, besides his revenge, there was something very important he needed to do. As soon as he arrived home, he remembered what had happened in his past life. Now, he wanted to prevent everything from happening again, even if it meant risking himself to the fullest. Upon arriving home, Bai Yi found his family. His father was in the living room watching television, while his mother prepared food in the kitchen. Bai Yi's father noticed that his son had arrived early. However, Bai Yi completely ignored him, focused only on his mother. He felt a deep emotion seeing her alive, as it had been a long time since the last time. As he approached his mother, she communicated through sign language that she had prepared Bai Yi's favorite spicy noodles. However, the protagonist expressed a desire to eat fish. His mother said the meal was already ready and asked if he couldn't leave the fish for the next day. Bai Yi insisted, claiming he was very hungry. Then his mother said she would go out to buy the fish. Bai Yi tried to go with her, but his father intervened, saying she could go alone. He questioned what was wrong with Bai Yi, who was returning home without even greeting his father. The father reminded him that that day was supposed to be the boy's awakening and asked if he had any good news to share. Bai Yi's father, who was also an awakened, mentioned that he had even bought beer to celebrate with his son. Bai Yi, however, explained that he had not awakened, as there hadn't been enough time for all students to go through the process. Annoyed, his father asked why he had returned so early. He claimed that the son of the great Lei had awakened a firefly class and, like his father, had become useless. But as his son, Bai Yi should, at the very least, awaken an abyss class, as it had been with him in his time. The father added that he worked hard to support the family, and the least the boy should do in return was awaken something good. Then he asked once again what Bai Yi's profession was. The protagonist insisted that he had not awakened. This, however, angered his father even more, and he broke a beer bottle over the boy's head. With his powers, the father was able to see his son's awakening and realized that Bai Yi had awakened a dust class, one of the lowest. Furious, the old man asked what the boy had been doing at school to awaken something so inferior. Bai Yi thought that his father had always been violent, someone who didn't know how to control his emotions. In the past, when Bai Yi awakened, his father also became furious because he had awakened such a low class and, feeling ashamed, took out all his frustration on his son. Bai Yi's mother tried to protect him as always, but ended up being the target of the aggression. She absorbed all her husband's fury. After the incident, she suffered severe consequences and was never the same again. Bai Yi carried the guilt for a long time, as on that day he couldn't do anything to help his mother. But now he thought he had an opportunity to do things differently. Although he wasn't as weak as in his past life, Bai Yi knew that his father was a much stronger awakened. Defeating him wouldn't be as easy as dealing with the school bully. Annoyed, the old man hit his son while uttering malicious words. While being beaten, Bai Yi could only think of getting his mother out of there as quickly as possible. At least he managed to get her out of the house. However, immediately afterward, he saw something he didn't want. His mother had returned home, arriving right in the middle of the conflict, exactly as in his past life. Bai Yi wondered why she had returned so early. Extremely angry, the father blamed his wife for their son's weak awakening and didn't seem willing to stop there. In his past life, the protagonist held a grudge for what had happened. At one point, he managed to avenge what happened to his mother, but ended up being arrested. However, he felt no remorse, as he believed the old man had received what he deserved. Back in the present, Bai Yi tries to protect his mother, acting differently than he did in his previous life. However, his father still proves to be much stronger than him. This is because awakened individuals, even without using their abilities, possess superior strength compared to ordinary people. A normal person would not be able to withstand a simple simple punch from an awakened individual. Although Bai Yi manages to withstand the blows, his mother, in turn, tries to protect him at all costs. However, the old man shows no intention of stopping. He claims he was extremely happy to learn he would have a son, as he believed the son would finally bring honor to the Bai family. Now, however, he declares that his family's honor has always depended on him. Furious, he questions why his wife had to give birth to a good-for-nothing. He tries to hit her with a chair, but fails. This is because the protagonist used his ability to protect his mother. Furthermore, he draws his sword and pushes his father away with a strike. After this, the old man realizes that the boy was, in fact, lying. He then says that the boy is finally learning to be a man, but still has a long way to go to achieve that goal. Next, he goes on the attack and manages to break the protagonist's sword. Not only that, but he also delivers a powerful blow. Bai Yi realizes that he is, in fact, no match for such superior power and feels his entire body aching. His father, in turn, states that he does not like to be challenged and does not hesitate to use force. The protagonist stands firm and does not dodge the attack. His father says that the boy is brave, but claims that it is useless after all, he is still weak. Bai Yi, in turn, thinks that he will not allow any tragedy to repeat itself in this life and endures whatever comes. His father, on the other hand, is venting all his anger, stating that he is the one in charge of that house. However, someone knocks on the door just as he was at the peak of his fury. Annoyed, the old man asks who is disturbing him. He opens the door and is surprised, because on the other side are the vice captain of the inspection force and an allied investigator. The protagonist's father asks what they are doing there. Liang explains that they received a report that a dangerous fugitive was seen in that area, and they are knocking door to door until they find him. The old man claims he has not seen anyone suspicious around, otherwise, he would have already reported it. However, the vice captain sees the protagonist and asks what happened to the boy. The father says that the boy fell on his way home, but there is nothing to worry about. However, the protagonist speaks up, claiming that his father did that to him. Upon hearing this, the old man cannot believe that the brat actually said that in front of the police. Minutes before entering the house, Bai Yi had already made an anonymous phone call to report the situation. He imagined he only needed to buy enough time for the authorities to arrive. His father tried to hide his reaction to Bai Yi's statement. However, Bai Yi continued, describing his father's actions in detail and stating he was willing to testify and undergo a physical examination. He also claimed that the law is explicit regarding the treatment of awakened individuals who cannot control their strength. The police officers were surprised by the boy's knowledge and the clarity of the details he presented. Given the evidence, the vice captain ordered the protagonist's father arrested, deeming the situation clear. Furious, the father tried to attack the boy but was restrained by the officers. As he was being led away, he promised that this would not go unpunished. Next, the protagonist's mother hugged him tightly. Bai Yi felt happy that he had managed to protect her this time, but he knew his father would be detained for a maximum of 15 days. He pondered that he would need to resolve the situation definitively, or everything would go back to how it was before. During the commotion, the protagonist took the opportunity to grab his father's key. This key opened a safe that his father kept hidden. After all, his father had betrayed his own companions in the past because of this safe. That was what allowed him to ascend and obtain a higher class. In his past life, Bai Yi only discovered these details after his father's death, as his father kept everything a secret. Now, however, he believed that possessing such an artifact would give him the necessary advantage. With a dagger like this, it would be possible to clear demonic lairs and level up quickly. The only problem was that all lairs were under the control of the Divine Squad, which only accepted guild members. Despite this, there were smaller lairs managed by Bai Yi's school. He had known about one of these hidden lairs in his past life. Therefore, he considered it best to deal with this quickly to strengthen himself. Meanwhile, at the police station, the officers regretted that the lead on the criminal Snow had turned out to be false. Regardless, the captain claimed they couldn't let their guard down, because if Snow were truly at large on the squad's anniversary, it would be a real scandal. At that moment, the protagonist's father tried to convince the police officers to release him. He said that if he were released, he could intercede with a friend who managed the best maternity hospital in the region, as the captain's wife was pregnant. However, Liang stated that he would not be easily bribed. He mentioned that Mr. Bai had once been a guild member and wondered how he had ended up in that situation. The investigator claimed that attempting to bribe a police officer would only worsen the father's situation, Escalation. Upon hearing this, the father became even more irritated with his son. Returning to the protagonist, he entered a lair. He thought that once discovered, guilds usually set up garrisons in these locations. Demonic lairs, filled with beasts and demonic ores, were the best option for the newly awakened to evolve. However, due to the dangers, novices always entered in teams, accompanied by a more experienced officer. In his past life, this lair remained hidden for 5 years and was only discovered after an incident when the accumulated monsters managed to escape and invade the surroundings. A lair like this usually required 3 rank E awakened individuals. A more dangerous lair, however, required a team of 5 people, with at least 2 rank D awakened individuals. The protagonist hoped this lair would be rank F, as he would then be able to clear the area alone. He crossed the entrance, even aware of the dangers ahead. He thought there was no alternative but to evolve as quickly as possible. After all, for him, the greatest danger did not lie in a lair, but in his own home. Upon entering the lair, the protagonist realized it was a frigid dungeon. Therefore, there could only be cloud-type demons. He approached and realized he wasn't the first human to enter that place. He encountered an ice bear-type demonic beast, which was hibernating. The protagonist noticed that the place was more dangerous than he had imagined. To make matters worse, one of the beasts advanced upon sensing his presence. At that moment, he realized that a mere snow wolf was stronger than him. Regardless, he knew he wouldn't leave without a fight. So, he tried to dodge enemy attacks to counterattack as soon as he found an opening. In this way, he managed to strike the wolf and achieve his first victory. Next, he realized that his father's hidden dagger was perfect for compensating for his lack of power. After all, it was an item that couldn't be bought on a market. Despite this, he concluded that he would need to eliminate about 20 wolves like that one to advance to the next level, and to move to the next rank, 10 more levels would be required. Then he saw the wolf pack approaching. He realized that the smell of blood had attracted them. Regardless, this was the group he needed to complete his task, so he wouldn't run now. The protagonist finds himself surrounded by wolves. Instead of retreating, he takes the initiative and goes on the offensive. He uses his agility to perform quick dodges and counterattacks with equal speed. His speed is so great that the wolves are unable to keep up with him. In a short time, he defeats his enemies. Finally, only the Wolf King remains, who is also defeated in a matter of seconds. With this victory, the protagonist ascends directly to rank D. However, he feels a deep exhaustion, as his stamina is no longer what it once was. Furthermore, the protagonist considers that a dimensional backpack would be extremely useful, because without it, many valuable items would have to be left behind. Most demonic lairs are monopolized by guild squads, which makes evolving outside of them a considerable challenge for the awakened. For many, joining a squad becomes the only viable alternative. Schools for the awakened are managed by guild squads and function as a rigorous selection process. Most students dream of being selected. However, being expelled from a squad implies the impossibility of evolving again, as happened with the protagonist's father, who remained stagnant at rank C after his expulsion. Bai Yi realizes that the cold is intensifying and that he is expending an excessive amount of energy. He decides then to speed up the process. He lures the wolves out of the cave. At the same time, he knocks down some nearby trees, using the environment to his advantage. However, by performing this maneuver, he inadvertently attracts the attention of a larger monster. A group of cloud serpents appears and manages to surround him. However, an explosion erupts right in front of the monsters. The protagonist assumes that, with all this commotion, the larger monster must have awakened. He is not mistaken, because immediately afterward, the hibernating bear awakens and appears right in front of him. Not only that, but the bear shows itself to be enraged and begins to attack everything in its path, including the other monsters in the dungeon. Bai Yi takes advantage of the situation to accumulate points, exploiting the openings that arise. The protagonist observes that, although they are strong, these beasts lack great intelligence. The bear, in turn, saved him considerable work by drawing attention to itself. Thus, Bai Yi takes the opportunity to deliver only the final blow to the creatures. However, even with the bear's help, the task still proves exhausting for him. He decides, therefore, to speed up the process. He realizes that with such destruction, the area is considerably shaken. Therefore, he waits for as many monsters as possible to approach and then breaks the ice floor. Upon observing the scenario carefully, Bai Yi noticed that he was on an ice bridge. Therefore, by destroying it, he not only secured some eliminations, but also created a strategic distance between himself and the monsters. Despite having defeated most of the monsters, one still remains. For this reason, he reserved his remaining energy to face the final boss. After all, every lair has a boss confrontation, and this one would be no different. However, the protagonist knows that, in this location, there is a monster even more dangerous than the bear. He imagines, however, that such a monster should have already manifested after so much commotion. In any case, he is now facing the bear. However, before he could act, Bai Yi sees more ice approaching and realizes he was not mistaken. The monster was not hibernating. It was merely waiting for the most opportune moment to attack. It froze the bear and cornered the protagonist in a trap. Upon realizing the situation, Bai Yi tries to escape. However, his foot is frozen, preventing his escape. He can no longer cross as the bridge has been destroyed. Thus, he realizes that he has fallen perfectly into the enemy's trap. And, despite the lair being low level, the location is inhabited by an intelligent boss. Subsequently, he encounters the demonic sorcerer and his minions, the snow monkeys. Bai Yi definitely did not expect such a turn of events, as he was placed in an extremely difficult situation to escape. Surrounded by the demonic wizard and his minions, the protagonist was in a critical situation. Frozen, Bai Yi could not move, and his body was rapidly losing energy. At that moment, the wizard ordered one of his monkeys to attack. Bai Yi remained completely still, as there wasn't much he could do. Then, he was attacked by the monkey. However, Bai Yi used the attack to his advantage. The monkey's blow broke the ice that held him. Although he used his powers to protect himself, he still emerged wounded, as he wasn't at 100% of his energy. In any case, Bai Yi realized that it would take some time for the wizard to conjure another powerful spell. Therefore, he concluded that he should defeat him before that happened. However, the already precarious situation worsened with the appearance of a bear. The protagonist thought that if it was already difficult before, with the help of reinforcements, the enemy had become even stronger. Furthermore, Bai Yi's vigor was extremely low. All of this combined drastically reduced his chances of victory. Even so, he continued fighting. But he realized that he wouldn't last much longer, as his strength was depleting. He dodged attacks as best he could. However, the environment was so cold that a large part of his energy dissipated just to keep his body warm. To make matters worse, the wizard kept attacking and summoned an ice storm. Bai Yi noticed that the wizard's cooldown time was faster than he had imagined. In his past life, he had faced all kinds of situations, and through these repeated challenges, he had developed a keen perception for recognizing opportunities. But now, Bai Yi realized he only had two options: stay and continue fighting to his limit, which wasn't very viable, as the chances of victory were practically zero, or flee while he still could. Given this, the protagonist ran towards the abyss. Before falling, he ended up being frozen. Even the wizard was surprised to see that. Bai Yi's plans involved using the ice to cushion the impact of his fall, and with that, he went straight to the bottom of the abyss. Meanwhile, at home, Bai Yi's mother thought he was sleeping in, but she was surprised to find her son's bed empty. The protagonist had left a note saying he had gone to a friend's house. However, his mother knew him well and thought that if it were true, Bai Yi wouldn't need to leave a note, as he could have spoken to her directly. She realized that ever since he had arrived home the day before, he seemed like a different person. Therefore, she wondered what had happened to her son. Returning to the protagonist, he thought that when the ice bridge broke, nearly 100 demonic beasts fell with it. At that time, he had only leveled up 3 times, which meant that about half of the beasts died, while the other half were still alive even after the fall. Thinking there would be a river at the bottom of the cliff, he decided to take a risk, and therefore jumped. However, even though he survived, he still took damage, and thought he might have pushed himself to his limit. As the protagonist felt on the verge of defeat, something unexpected emerged to worsen his situation. A saber-toothed tiger, known as Lord Glacial, found him. In that instant, Bai Yi recalled the past, the moments of camaraderie with his friends, moments he had left behind when he returned and started from scratch. The only advantage of that choice was being able to see his mother again. However, this fragile reality was about to crumble. If he perished now, his father would return home, leaving his mother completely vulnerable. Furthermore, Bai Yi would not achieve his revenge against the traitor who annihilated his team. He refused to succumb in that way. He needed to act, even if it meant overcoming his own limits. With determination, he grabbed one of the tiger's fangs, swearing to himself that he would not allow history to repeat itself. Bai Yi gathered all his strength and, with a precise blow, defeated the tiger. In this way, he managed to get up. However, that was a tiger's den, and soon the others emerged, ready for battle. However, the protagonist knew that it was in moments of life or death that a class advancement could be awakened. What didn't kill him, in fact, made him stronger. Although he was surrounded by powerful enemies, the protagonist was filled with adrenaline. He realized that the acquired bonus was not enough to level up, but in return, he had gained a new ability. It was time, then, to test this power in practice, as the first target was right in front of him. Bai Yi wasted no time and executed the move called Sanctuary. All the surrounding creatures felt the pressure of his strength. With a single attack, he managed to take down several monsters. and consequently, his attributes increased. In this way, he felt more prepared to return to the boss and clear the dungeon. The monsters now became significantly weaker, as Bai Yi was at rank 8, and even the cold no longer bothered him. His sanctuary move absorbed all enemy attacks and returned them at once to the attackers, but it was a resource that could not be used constantly. In any case, Bai Yi had recovered his vigor. Reflecting, he barely knew how long he had been in there and thought it best to return home soon. At the top of the hill, the boss rested. He had a cabin he used as a refuge along with his allies. However, his tranquility was abruptly interrupted as the protagonist appeared and declared he was there to settle his scores. At the protagonist's house, his mother was worried, not knowing where her son had gone and fearing that something bad might have happened. Meanwhile, Bai Yi had just invaded the boss's cabin. He threw the bear at the enemy's dwelling, destroying a considerable portion of it. Upon encountering the boss again, Bai Yi immediately showed that he was not to be trifled with. The enemy, however, was unfazed and ordered his servants to attack Bai Yi. This time, Bai Yi was visibly stronger. He not only defended himself, but also attacked and eliminated the enemies with ease. Annoyed, the sorcerer launched an ice storm at him. However, unlike the first time, Bai Yi was immune to the attack and was not frozen. Realizing the ineffectiveness of his magic, the sorcerer resorted to other measures, summoning more monkey minions. However, Bai Yi was determined to defeat him, as he knew this victory would allow him to reach rank D. Attacking with greater intensity, he managed to hit the hand the enemy used to cast spells, preventing the mage from continuing his magic. With the mage vulnerable, Bai Yi attacked to eliminate him once and for all. In this way, he gained a lot of experience and advanced to rank D. Furthermore, he noticed that he had accumulated enough cloud elemental energy to earn a bonus. This meant he had acquired a new red class profession, being able to switch between them at any time. He also obtained good items from the monsters and gained more space in his inventory. Even after defeating the dungeon boss, Bai Yi decided not to leave before eliminating all remaining monsters. He took the opportunity to test his new ability before leaving the cave. Sometime later, Bai Yi's mother was still worried at home until he finally returned. She was already believing that something bad had happened, but Bai Yi entered, apologized for the delay, and showed that he was fine. Immediately, his mother hugged him. To console her, Bai Yi said he had a proposal and asked her to listen to what he had to say. As soon as he reunited with his mother, Bai Yi suggested they move to a better place. He had collected valuable items in the dungeon and knew he could get a considerable sum by selling them. Bai Yi presented one of the stones to a buyer. The buyer appreciated the item but considered Bai Yi's initial price quite high, arguing that a stone of that type wasn't worth so much. After some negotiation, they both reached an agreement. With the money obtained, Bai Yi imagined he could rent a much more suitable place to live. He recalled that, in his past life, his mother had never had a single day of peace. Now, he wanted to act differently and provide her with the utmost comfort. Bai Yi managed to secure a good rental agreement, ensuring them a decent place to live. Seeing his mother so happy, he realized it had been a long time since he had last seen her smile. With the housing issue resolved, Bai Yi decided to focus on strengthening himself. He knew that his father, even incarcerated, still posed a threat. He needed to resolve this issue before embarking on a new journey. He managed to craft a bracelet with a magical stone, believing it would help him fulfill his purpose. Far from there, a group of adventurers entered a dungeon. One of the members praised the leader's performance. The leader's sister offered him water and suggested a break. However, the leader refused, stating that they needed to go to the demonic lair to train while there was still time. The leader, named Ding Ding, believed that no one would surpass him in the simulated combat test, as he considered himself a true genius. Meanwhile, a woman analyzed the list of awakened novices. She noticed that none of them had reached the gold level class that year. Consequently, she concluded that there would be nothing exciting during the simulation. Back to Bai Yi, he woke up in his new apartment and found breakfast prepared by his mother. Bai Yi asked why his mother hadn't woken him up. She replied that she hadn't had the heart to wake him, as he seemed very tired. She added that occasionally being late for the sake of sleep and food wouldn't hurt. Bai Yi himself realized that indeed it had been a long time since he had slept or eaten so well. His mother asked if he needed any new books or toys. Bai Yi questioned why his mother wanted to give him a gift for no apparent reason. His mother explained that it wasn't without reason, as his birthday was approaching. At that moment, Bai Yi remembered his birthday. He had forgotten the date because he hadn't celebrated it for so long. While eating, he reflected on the matter. However, he concluded that he didn't need presents, as he already possessed everything he desired. His only true goal was to achieve his long-desired revenge. After the weekend, the students returned to school. The teacher announced that it was time to train for the simulated combat. He added that, as the school was subordinate to the Divine Guild, they would be under constant constant observation. The simulated combat was the first stage where everyone presented themselves after awakening, functioning as the final assessment of elementary school and would be broadcast live. Furthermore, whoever excelled would have the chance to participate in the training journey alongside advanced high school students. This journey represented the fastest way to get closer to the Divine Guild. The school gathered the best elementary and high school students to travel to the sacred country where the Divine Guild's headquarters were located. Upon hearing this, Bai Yi recalled that it was in that place he had met his old master. However, it was also the place where the traitor had been born. Nevertheless, they never got to know each other, as the traitor joined the squad much later. In any case, Bai Yi realized that if he wanted to meet them again, he would need to excel in this assessment to be admitted to the advanced training journey. Bai Yi might be the only one motivated by revenge, but he wasn't the only student aiming for victory. Noticing the general excitement, the teacher announced the start of the test. He explained that the first stage would be physical conditioning. The students should enter the gravity room and perform 10 sets of zigzag running. While the others competed to be the first to enter, Bai Yi made a different decision. He informed the teacher that he would not like to use that room. The professor was surprised by Bai Yi's request. However, he warned that despite Bai Yi's talent, it did not exempt him from evaluation. Bai Yi, however, clarified that he was not running away, but rather seeking a different type of evaluation. The professor then questioned if Bai Yi was implying that his teaching method was inadequate. Bai Yi argued that physical preparation was important, but its usefulness was restricted to specific classes. He suggested that mages and sorcerers would benefit much more from training in an elemental room, as each class required special attention. Upon hearing this, Qi Yin realized that the method described by Bai Yi was identical to what instructor Dongyang from the Divine Squad had suggested. However, this was very recent information, which she only knew through her father. Qi Yin wondered how her classmate could have access to such knowledge. Contrary to what the other students expected, the professor was not annoyed with Bai Yi. In fact, he found the young man's suggestion quite interesting. He explained, however, that with so many students in the school, it was difficult to adapt individual training in such a short time. For a teacher, deciding between guiding a student's training or allowing them to follow their own path was a great dilemma. Bai Yi reflected that, in his past life, he had been fortunate enough to find good teachers. Without them, he would never have ascended the ranks. He knew he could trust his masters, and now he asked the professor to trust him too. The professor decided to allow Bai Yi to train in his own way, but asked what his plans were. Bai Yi replied that he wished to set the elemental room's pressure to the maximum level. Knowing he could not reveal the truth, he explained that despite being a warrior, he wanted to balance his skills and improve his weaknesses. At that moment, Qi Yin, his classmate, declared that she also wanted to use the elemental room, as she was a mage. She asked to train with Bai Yi, but he preferred to do it alone. Upon being rejected, Qi Yin stated that she would use that as motivation to prove her worth and earn Bai Yi's trust. As Bai Yi and Qi Yin headed to the elemental room, the nerdy classmate thought he would have to work very hard to reach their level. Back to Bai Yi, he was alone in the elemental room, determined to use the space to acquire new skills away from curious eyes. After all, everything that happened there was monitored, and only in a room like that could he obtain skills from other classes without raising suspicion. Exposing himself otherwise would put a target on his back. As for the other students, Bai Yi decided it would be better not to get involved with them. After class, Bai Yi tried to go home alone. However, he was caught up by his classmates. He thought that, in his past life, the three of them were best friends and always walked together, as they were the school's outcasts. Now, however, he only thought of his revenge and believed that friendships would only hinder his goal. His nerdy classmate began to notice that, ever since the awakening exam, Bai Yi was different and no longer wanted to hang out with them. Even so, Bai Yi approached the nerd and advised him to get his lungs checked as soon as possible. Then, he got on his bicycle and left, leaving the two students confused. Bai Yi recalled that, in his past life, his classmate had been diagnosed with a lung disease that, due to being discovered late, led him to perish early. The nerd, in turn, felt that, although Bai Yi had changed his behavior, there was still something good coming from him. The scene shifts to the sacred realm, specifically to a novice training ground. One of the veterans comments that he heard a new recruit from the Divine Squad has been showing remarkable performance. Facing the recruit, he asks if it's true that the young man broke all records. The recruit, who is actually the protagonist's enemy, replies that Lord Dongyang is exaggerating, as he is only there to formally introduce himself. Turning to Bai Yi, he asks his mother to avoid going out at night, explaining that from now on, he will do the shopping on his way back home so she doesn't have to worry. Bai Yi reflects that he needs to ensure his mother's safety in a stable environment as quickly as possible, because he knows what is about to happen. Meanwhile, in the prison where Bai Yi's father is being held, he devised a plan with the canteen leader. He bribed him to gain an advantage and negotiated a way to escape from prison. down. The next day, Bai Yi is at his school. He is progressing in his mage class and can already manipulate elemental force to his advantage. His friends try to interact with him, but Bai Yi continues to ignore them. He tells them that instead of wasting time with him, they should train to become stronger. In a way, they interpret these words as encouragement. In turn, the nerdy classmate decided to follow Bai Yi's advice and went to the school infirmary. The doctor in charge soon detected the boy's lung disease and advised him to schedule surgery as soon as possible. Upon hearing this, the nerd wonders how Bai Yi knew about his condition. After all, he himself had no idea of his condition, and if it weren't for Bai Yi, he wouldn't have discovered it so soon. After the consultation, the nerd overhears a suspicious conversation in the school corridors. One of the boys comments that Qiangsheng cheated again and has already risen to rank 4, reaching first place in the evaluation. After all, he possesses a private dungeon to evolve. They also recall the boy who provoked Qiangsheng recently. They claim that Qiangsheng plans revenge against the novice and is about to set up an ambush. After all, a spoiled boy would not accept being humiliated without retaliating. Furthermore, he is armed and intends to carry out his plan outside the school so as not to suffer any kind of punishment. Upon hearing everything, the nerd ran to warn Bai Yi. He imagined that outside of school, no one could interfere with a revenge plot. He feared that even if Bai Yi was strong, he could be caught by surprise and incapacitated before reacting. Although he always avoided conflicts, this time the nerd decided not to be a coward. He headed to the school's armory and broke the chains. His hope was to compensate for his lack of skills with a magical weapon. To protect a friend, he was willing to suffer the consequences. However, he was surprised to be discovered. Qi Yin appeared and asked where the boy thought he was going with a stolen weapon. The nerd replied that he needed to save Bai Yi. At this, Qi Yin became confused by the information. Meanwhile, the protagonist Bai Yi was returning home and entered an alley with his bicycle. Since leaving school, he had noticed he was being followed and told Hong Qiangsheng to stop hiding. Then, the bully Hong Qiangsheng revealed himself and declared that he would finally settle the score for what happened last week. Bai Yi asked if he was truly confident that the outcome would be different this time. His opponent replied affirmatively and launched an attack, stating that no amount of training would protect the protagonist from his blow. To Hong Qiangsheng's surprise, Bai Yi managed to defend himself without any difficulty. The opponent questioned if this was really happening, as he hadn't imagined he would be defeated by Bai Yi again. In turn, Bai Yi replied that his opponent hadn't been the only one to grow stronger. Bai Yi thought there was something Hong Qiangsheng hadn't noticed the first time they fought, but at that moment, Hong Qiangsheng finally understood that Bai Yi was far above his level and he would never be able to catch up. Hong Qiangsheng, still in shock, asked Bai Yi how he had managed to level up so quickly. He himself had trained intensely outside of school, dedicating himself to the fullest, and even so, he had barely achieved the expected results. Therefore, he couldn't understand how a boy without the same resources could have progressed more than him. In response, Bai Yi stated that the spoiled boy didn't know the true meaning of effort and questioned if he had ever died in his life. Frightened, Hong Qiangsheng asked if Bai Yi intended to eliminate him once and for all. The protagonist replied that, although he didn't like being pursued, he didn't hate the spoiled boy. He added that instead of preparing a decent ambush, he preferred to act alone, believing that would be enough to win. Annoyed, Hong Qiangsheng declared that if the protagonist didn't eliminate him at that moment, he wouldn't give up on defeating him and that they would soon meet again. At that instant, the protagonist's classmates arrived at the scene. However, they realized that Hong Qiangsheng had already been defeated. Bai Yi then told his opponent that he had a proposal for him. He stated that he could show him a path to become stronger and faster, but for that, Hong Qiangsheng would have to offer something in return. Sometime later, back at school, the teacher announced the end of the training week and that the combat simulation was about to begin. However, before that, he issued an important warning. Despite being called a combat simulation, the place they were going was a real demonic lair. Much of the danger had been sealed by barriers, but it was still no joke. Therefore, students should be cautious of the creatures inhabiting it. To assist, senior high school students would accompany the novices, but they would only interfere if necessary, as the main objective was to ensure everyone's safety. Teams would consist of 4 to 5 students, with a veteran leading each group into a dungeon. Each could choose between rank F or rank E demonic lairs. However, those who were not prepared should not face the more difficult challenge, as they risked losing credits, in addition to failing the mission. Next, the teacher allowed the students to make their decisions and asked those who felt confident enough to face the more difficult lair to raise their hands. Qi Yin was the first to speak up. Hong Qiangsheng did the same immediately after. The teacher informed them that out of 180 students, only 8 had accepted the rank E lair challenge. Therefore, the rest would be distributed among the rank F lairs. However, the protagonist spoke up and declared that he wished to challenge a rank D spiritual jade demonic lair. After the protagonist, Bai Yi, made such an unusual request, the professor was left speechless. Not only him, but all the other students were also astonished. In turn, the professor questioned, "What kind of crazy idea is that?" At that moment, Hong Liang intervened, arguing that D-rank lairs are meant for veterans, too dangerous for a novice. He declared that he would not allow such a risk. Still, Bai Yi countered, stating that according to the school's rules, there is no explicit prohibition. Each student has the freedom to choose the rank they wish to challenge. He added that the institution's focus is to discover exceptional talents for the Divine Squad, and that such talents are defined by courage, strength, a sense of responsibility, and a natural gift. He then questioned whether the director would truly take away his chance to prove his worth. Hong Liang felt cornered, but argued that to enter the lair, it was mandatory to be in a team. Insistently, Bai Yi stated that he could manage on his own. However, the director reiterated that, according to the rules, forming a team was essential for the student's own safety. Next, Chi Yin spoke up, declaring that she would go with Bai Yi. The director hesitated to allow it, claiming that the girl's father would not approve. However, Chi Yin stated that she did not want to be left behind, and also wished to have the chance to get the highest score. In turn, Bai Yi refused the help, insisting that he would go alone. However, the professor intervened, saying that refusing was not an option. If Bai Yi truly wanted to go to a D-rank lair, he would have to agree to go in a team. Now, a veteran was missing, but the professor didn't know who he should send along, until a student spoke up, stating that someone needed to do it, and offered to accompany the novices. At that moment, the professor introduced the student Zealing and asked him to look after the young ones. Chi Yin commented that this veteran had almost joined the school's guild. Meanwhile, Bai Yi thought that he had never heard of that young man. On the other hand, Zealing thought that Bai Yi was just a boy wanting to show off in front of everyone, and that he barely knew what was coming. In any case, the professor declared that with the team formed, they could proceed to the test. He added that inside the lair, camera drones would accompany them to broadcast everything live. As a professor, he strived to keep all students motivated and expressed his eagerness to know who would achieve the highest score this year. Bai Yi was fully aware that the awakened school had been built upon an ancient and vast demon lair, which had been conquered long ago. The middle and high school sections were integrated into the same complex. This main lair had spawned numerous smaller ones, ideal for students to use in their combat tests. Most of these secondary lairs ranged from F to D ranks. The moment a student entered the instance, the combat simulation officially began. However, all the action was broadcast live, and every moment was recorded. For this reason, Bai Yi pondered that he needed to be cautious not to expose all his abilities in front of strangers. In any case, the spiritual jade demon lair was his main target. Once inside the lair, Xiling stated that he would protect the others, as he had faced a place like that before. Chi Yin asked if the monsters in that place were truly strong. Xiling replied yes, but pointed out that the school had sealed off the most dangerous monsters, making the emergence of something truly threatening, like a boss, unlikely. However, he warned Chi Yin not to underestimate the other monsters, because even with the most dangerous ones sealed, those that remained were considerably powerful. Xiling claimed that, as a veteran, it was his duty to protect the novices and, therefore, he would help them earn some student credits. Next, Xiling noticed the protagonist advancing alone, without waiting for him. He warned that if Bai Yi continued like that, he would end up attracting monsters. In turn, the protagonist declared that he was fed up with so much talk. He added that he didn't need help, and asked Xiling not to get in his way. Xiling was dumbfounded by such audacity. In any case, everything that happened there was broadcast live. Everyone at the school, whether students or teachers, could follow what was happening in the lairs. Meanwhile, at the school guild, the guild's vice leader was watching the broadcast, and commented that he had found something quite interesting. He explained that this year, there was a freshman who had deliberately chosen a D-rank lair. His boss asked what class that student belonged to. The vice leader replied that the boy belonged to the Green Warrior class, considered the most useless of all, and expressed a desire to follow him to discover the source of such confidence. Meanwhile, one of the students was terrified. He was terrified because he was in the F-rank dungeon, the weakest in the school. His teammate reminded him that as a caster, he should stay in the back, offering support, and that there was no need for so much tension. Then, the student asked how an F-rank dungeon, considered weak, could be so frightening. Little did he know that elsewhere, the students in the E-rank dungeon were facing much greater difficulties. A group had just been ambushed and was being tended to by a healer. In this scenario, Hong Qiangsheng spoke up, stating that he would fight alone if necessary. After all, his goal was to surpass his rival. Meanwhile, inside the D-rank dungeon, Bai Yi, the protagonist, was facing powerful monsters and defeating them one by one. Impressed, Qi Yin, his teammate, asked how he had managed to do all that by himself. Bai Yi explained that the monsters there were sealed, only able to use half of their strength, and therefore were not as powerful as they seemed. Nevertheless, Qi Yin was delighted by the explanation and stated that even with her best efforts, she was still far from reaching him. Bai Yi advised her not to worry about others, but about herself, because only then would she truly evolve. Upon hearing this, Qi Yin found him even cooler and promised that she would do her best to catch up to him one day. Unlike her, Xiling did not like this arrogant attitude at all. He stated that both of them were in a D-rank dungeon and warned the protagonist about the dangers, advising him not to boast excessively. He added that the boy had only beginner's luck, but that if he cooperated, he could receive some tips from his senior. For his part, Bai Yi completely ignored the older student and instructed Qi Yin to take care of the monsters on the right, while he headed to the left. He proceeded towards his objective, leaving the senior talking to himself. Bai Yi informed his teammate that the monsters on the right seemed weaker, and asked if she could handle them alone. He explained that this simulated combat served to test each person's individual skill, so she would have to start acting if she wanted a good grade. Qi Yin understood, and said she would do her best. While the two were getting organized, the senior was fuming with rage. He thought that the arrogant boy was just complicating things. The protagonist's performance was observed from afar. The teachers could barely keep up with the other students, who were completely engrossed in Bai Yi's feats. By this point, everyone already knew that Bai Yi himself had requested to be sent to an F-rank dungeon. Observers noted that Bai Yi had directed Qi Yin to the opposite side, realizing that the girl, being a flower type, could effectively deal with monsters of the same category. Bai Yi's teacher understood that the young man knew exactly what he was doing, and concluded that, indeed, he was not boasting without reason. Previously, Bai Yi had noticed that star-type monsters were emerging from the cave on the right. These monsters, besides being low-level, were weak against the flower element, the class representative's specialty. Aware of this, he allowed Qi Yin to fight alone, as he believed she would be able to defend herself. In a way, he was not mistaken. As a mage, Qi Yin possessed the appropriate skills to face those monsters, and therefore was able to defeat them with relative ease. Bai Yi knew that at E rank, mages acquired a basic skill specific to their class. Qi Yin's skill allowed her to use plants to create a poisonous barrier. However, for her first time in a dungeon, facing higher-level monsters alone and still maintaining her composure was truly surprising. Bai Yi thought that the D-rank monsters should all be sealed and considered that he could let Qi Yin handle the rear. This way, he imagined he would achieve a high score without revealing his true strength live. However, it would not be possible to continue if he were constantly followed by the transmission equipment. While Bai Yi pondered how to proceed, the senior Xiling remained in his corner, consumed by rage. Xiling did not like being ignored and now intended to do something to hinder the protagonist. At that instant, he shot an arrow in Qi Yin's direction. The arrow did not hit the girl, but passed right by her and went into a cave. When questioned by Qi Yin, the senior Xiling claimed he only wanted to grant a buff, but she had dodged. His lie might have gone unnoticed, but the arrow did not, as it served to awaken a monster that was dormant in the cave. A two-headed lion, much stronger than the common monsters of that dungeon, was now furious and about to unleash its wrath. The protagonist immediately realizes the gravity of the situation, noticing that his colleague is in trouble. Qi Yin tries to use her magic to contain the creature, but her efforts are insufficient. She is left at the mercy of the monster's attacks. Xiling, in turn, laughs at the situation, satisfied with the chaos he caused. In contrast, Bai Yi acts quickly in defense of Qi Yin. He realizes that the creature has not been contained and decides to intervene before the worst happens. However, Bai Yi only manages to wound the monster without killing it. He concludes that the creature is faster than he imagined. Observing closely, Xiling reflects that he knows the dungeon like no one else. He knew exactly where the two-headed lion was and the dangers it posed. That's why he didn't hesitate to release the monster to disrupt the protagonist's plans. Furthermore, Xiling even strengthened the creature with his own ability. Realizing the abnormality of the situation, Bai Yi considers using his full strength, as he sees no other alternative. He then orders Chi-Yin to retreat, explaining that she won't be able to help at that moment. The monster, without wasting time, attacks. However, instead of retreating, Chi-Yin tries to help with her magic. She casts magical roots to bind the creature and creates a wall of vines with 3 layers of protection. Even Bai Yi is surprised by her action. The girl states that, although Bai Yi doesn't think it's a good idea, she can help him defeat the monster. Despite the danger, Chi-Yin insists on fighting. Upon witnessing this, the veteran thinks that the girl was almost swallowed just now. He wonders what drives her to persist in facing the monster, despite the risk. The protagonist himself confesses that he expected Chi-Yin to freeze in fear, but he realizes that the girl possesses greater emotional strength than she appears to have. Chi-Yin declares that she worked too hard to get there and will not give up at this point. Chi-Yin added that as long as Bai Yi was by her side, she would not die. Bai Yi, in turn, warned that the power of the 3 layers, though useful, was limited, and advised her not to overdo it. He recalled that the Chi-Yin from his past life had been brilliant since elementary school. Always optimistic and confident, she was also generous. Although she came from a powerful family, she was always kind to everyone, which led her to be elected class representative, given the trust she inspired. After that period, Bai Yi lost contact with her, assuming she had led a normal life. Now, however, he felt he could trust Chi-Yin, and if no unforeseen events occurred, he might be able to overcome the situation without revealing his true power. Observing the scene, the veteran doubted that the two could defeat the monster. After all, he believed that excessive confidence was not enough to win battles. With such limited powers, it was impossible for novices to defeat such a powerful creature. He imagined it was only a matter of time until they begged for help. Next, the monster managed to free itself from the roots. Bai Yi announced that he would distract the monster, asking Chi-Yin to attack the lion at the right moment, aiming for its core. He moved away. He believed that because he had wounded it, he would be the creature's main target. Certain of his strategy, Bai Yi ran towards a lake and jumped into the water without hesitation. He dove deep, but the monster followed him. However, Bai Yi had attracted the monster exactly where he wanted it. As soon as he gave the signal, Chi-Yin used the magical vines again, trapping the creature. The monster was now vulnerable to attacks, and seeing itself trapped, fell into despair. Chi-Yin, with the vines, completely immobilized the lion, leaving it unable to move. Furthermore, she applied poison to weaken it even further. Bai Yi realized that the lion would no longer be able to free itself. Then, he stated that this was the perfect moment to complete the test with a maximum score. Xiling gaped at the scene, unable to believe what he was seeing. After all, not even he, an experienced veteran, could immobilize such a powerful creature. Realizing his plan had failed, Xiling felt annoyed but acknowledged there was little he could do. In the broadcast booth, the director watched everything along with the other team members. The protagonist's professor praised his students' reaction time and demonstrated leadership. For him, there was no doubt who would achieve the maximum score in that test. He and the others speculated that if the full recording were sent for guild analysis, they might even break the historical score record. However, amidst this anticipation, the transmission was suddenly cut. Xiling had intentionally knocked down the drone, believing that this way, Bai Yi wouldn't achieve the maximum score. He assumed the protagonist hadn't yet noticed the drone's fall, as he had seen him distracted, talking with his colleague. Xiling approached and declared that they were finished and could therefore leave the dungeon. After all, he himself couldn't stand staying there any longer. In turn, Bai Yi stated that the veteran knew exactly what he was doing by awakening the sleeping beast. Xiling claimed that wasn't the case, as he was just trying to give the girl a bonus, but she dodged. However, the protagonist retorted that, as a veteran archer, Xiling should have come up with a more convincing excuse. Chi-Yin agreed, saying that made sense, and that she now understood why the veteran hadn't managed to join the school guild. Annoyed, Xiling asked if he was being accused of something. The protagonist stepped forward, protecting his colleague. Even annoyed, Xiling knew he couldn't act rashly. However, he declared that it wasn't over yet, and promised to see them again. On the way out of the dungeon, the protagonist spotted the destroyed drone. Chi-Yin began to realize that the veteran had only served to sabotage them. However, instead of lamenting, the protagonist saw an opportunity. He claimed that he now had the chance to do what was left, since no one was watching. His colleague asked what that meant. In response, the protagonist led her to the previous portal. He asked the class representative to keep what had happened a secret, but he believed that even if she told, no one would believe her. Confused, Chi-Yin asked what he was talking about. In his last meeting with Hong Qiangsheng, the protagonist had requested an item, the demonic stone, necessary to break the seals the boy's uncle guarded. With that stone in his possession, the protagonist had everything he needed in place and could now undo the dungeon's seal. Qi Yin didn't think that was a good idea. After all, it was a rank D dungeon, and breaking the seal would release high-level beasts all at once. The protagonist knew this very well and was counting on that situation, but he reassured his colleague, claiming that even with the seal broken, the creatures would still have their powers reduced. Even so, Qi Yin argued that just the two of them wouldn't be enough to defeat so many enemies. However, the protagonist stated that he would do it alone. Qi Yin was truly startled when she noticed something. She saw that the protagonist had suddenly changed to the mage class and asked how he had done that. The protagonist, Bai Yi, asked his colleague, Qi Yin, to wait outside. Then he undid the barrier, and the monsters appeared. Bai Yi stood before the creatures. Qi Yin watched, apprehensive about his safety. However, the protagonist knew exactly what he was doing. He used his mage ability to freeze the enemies. The creatures were immediately incapacitated. Qi Yin was deeply impressed by such power, especially since she herself had barely managed to defeat a single lion. Seeing her colleague freeze several enemies at once with such ease left her in shock. In turn, Bai Yi explained that those monsters, sealed for so long, must have been on the verge of exploding. He stated that he needed more space. Quickly, Qi Yin moved away, allowing her colleague to act. A short time later, new monsters appeared. This time, they were wild flame leopards. The protagonist noticed that, although these monsters were rank D, the long period of sealing had reduced their strength by half. So, he again used his freezing ability to control the enemies. The instant he saw another enemy approach, he quickly exited the mage class and switched to warrior mode, as he now needed to fight hand-to-hand instead of using magic. Bai Yi thought the enemies would try to catch him off guard. However, the monsters were not as cunning as he was. At that moment, the protagonist switched back to mage mode and managed to freeze the leopard. Witnessing all this, Qi Yin was shocked by her colleague's ability to switch classes, and with such speed. Now she understood why Bai Yi had desired so much privacy in the elemental room, considering that the basis of the mage class is to release energy as forces of nature or manipulate objects of the same element. It made sense to practice in an elemental room. Qi Yin believed that the more mana she had, and the more times she could cast spells, the stronger she would be. However, upon seeing Bai Yi fight, she concluded that the most important thing was control. Elemental power coming from nature is raw, wild, and difficult to master. Only by completely mastering one's own elemental power can one create more varied movements. He could use a basic ability in so many different ways that it was impressive. Not only that, but Qi Yin realized that unlike her colleague possessed total mastery of the mage class. Qi Yin admits the truth. Her colleague had long surpassed everyone else. Instead of frustration, she feels even greater admiration. Soon after, an even more powerful monster emerges, a level 15 infernal mammoth. The protagonist, however, is not surprised, as he had already anticipated such a challenge. He prepares for battle, switching to the warrior class. He imagined that what he was looking for would be with that mammoth. Next, he strikes the mammoth on the head. Bai Yi considers that, after being sealed for so long, the mammoth would be more vulnerable than usual, which explained the ease of the strike. Even so, a monster of such magnitude would not succumb to a single attack. Thus, the protagonist continues his attacks until he completely defeats the enemy. In the heat of battle, he invokes an ability. This power is known as Sanctuary. With it, his strikes are amplified. In this way, not only the mammoth, but also the other enemies are defeated by the protagonist. He then receives all the bonuses for the victory. However, what truly matters is not the reward, but rather the item the mammoth dropped. It is the King's Reply Stone, a pair of jade stones with a special function. In addition to the item, the protagonist's mage class ascends to rank D. However, he now faces another challenge. His teammate still remains in a state of shock. The protagonist approaches her and asks if she remembers their agreement. Although visibly disoriented, Qi Yin harbors no ill intentions. After all, she also leveled up just by being part of Bai Yi's team. Meanwhile, outside the dungeon, the teachers are in a panic. The camera monitoring the most important student stopped working, and they fear that the dungeon seal has broken. One of the teachers finds the veteran student who was supposed to be accompanying the novices and questions why he is there alone. However, the teacher concludes that there is no time for inquiries. If the seal has truly broken, everyone needs to head to the dungeon urgently. Witnessing the situation, Zeeling thinks it would be beneficial if the seal did break, as that would mean the end of the arrogant student. In a state of desperation, the teachers and students enter the dungeon. However, they encounter the two students, Bai Yi and Qi Yin, safe and sound. In turn, the protagonist asks the teachers why they came to the dungeon. The teacher explains that due to the energy fluctuation, they believe the seal had broken. Now, however, they realized that it was all just a misunderstanding. A little before leaving school, Zeeling sought out the student guild's vice captain, looking for a spot on the team. However, the vice captain informed him that someone else had already been selected to fill the position. Zeiling, the veteran student, obviously fell into despair. After all, he believed that this spot belonged to him and did not understand the reason for his rejection. At that moment, the guild captain speaks up, claiming that a more talented person had been found. Her name is Hele, and she states that Bai Yi is more interesting than any other student. On the same day, in another location, inspection team investigator Chen Jinwoo, the same person who assisted in the protagonist's father's arrest, talks with the protagonist's father outside the prison, claiming it was difficult to get him out and asking him not to get into any more trouble. Chen Jinwoo informs him that Captain Hong will arrive soon and states that Mr. Bai already knows what to do. Upon receiving a call from his boss, Chen Jinwoo announces that he is leaving and adds that Mr. Bai knows how to get home by himself. In turn, the protagonist's father expresses his anxiety about this. Upon returning home, the protagonist's father had a surprise. His wife and son were not there. Irritated, he began to smash objects, wondering how they dared to flee. His rage grew to such an extent that he wished to eliminate his own family upon finding them again. Meanwhile, the protagonist presented his mother with one half of the resonance jade. He instructed her to keep the object with her at all times. From that moment on, the other half remained with Bai Yi. Bai Yi explained that if she were in danger, she would only need to break her half of the jade. The other part would be instantly signaled. The protagonist stated that only then would he feel at ease leaving her alone when he left home. Bai Yi thought his mother had never received a gift like that. In fact, she had never even had the basic things every woman should have. His mother commented that Bai Yi shouldn't spend all his time attached to her, as at his age, it was common to go out and have fun with friends. The protagonist replied that it was fine. After all, he didn't need friends. His mother, however, disagreed, arguing that he needed to make friends, as it was essential to have important people he could count on. Bai Yi recalled his past, aware that he had once had friends. He wondered if, in this life, he would find friends again. Sometime later, Bai Yi headed to another demonic lair. Having resolved his other pending matters, he wished to focus on strengthening himself, and found a rarely used lair due to its extreme difficulty. With the goal of improving himself, Bai Yi entered the dungeon. He reflected that in his past life, he had become a high-level warrior. However, that didn't prevent his companions from being eliminated. Now, he wanted to act differently, knowing that strength alone wouldn't be enough. In any case, evolving was important. But this time, the protagonist adopted a more individualistic mindset. For him, there was no point in having friends. It was better to focus on himself than on a team. Because on the day the gods decided to toy with him again, dying alone would be preferable to seeing his friends eliminated before his eyes. Above all, he wished to become stronger than anyone else, and intended to do so as quickly as possible, even if it meant fighting with all his might. Bai Yi still considered himself weak, as he believed he couldn't defeat his father, even fighting with all his strength, not to mention the one who killed him in his past life. Furthermore, there were no shortcuts, and the option to give up the fight didn't exist. His only alternative, therefore, was to evolve to the fullest, until he reached a level superior to that of his enemies. Facing the monsters, the protagonist invokes the Sanctuary skill. With it, he eliminates several of them. However, time is running out, as the dungeon gate is about to close. He knows he needs to defeat the boss quickly to complete the task. It doesn't take long until he locates the enemy. Bai Yi faces the monster, aware that this is the final challenge. To his surprise, the boss proves to be faster than he imagined. It is a level 20 Ye Wuming. However, the protagonist does not remain idle. Before being attacked, he delivers a blow. But upon being hit, the boss recovers instantly and again prepares for the attack. Bai Yi realizes that the enemy's regenerative ability is extraordinarily powerful. In response, the monster attacks the ground and moves its roots underground. From the ground, carnivorous plants emerge. The protagonist, who thought he had defeated them all, realizes his mistake. He reflects that a D-rank boss should not possess such strength. However, the surprises do not cease. The protagonist is hit from behind. Another boss appears, Qi Wuming, Ye Wuming's twin brother. Now, Bai Yi faces a double problem. Consequently, he takes longer than expected to exit the dungeon. At home, his distressed mother worries because her son has not appeared nor given news of his whereabouts. Fearing the worst, she decides to go out in search of her son. Meanwhile, the protagonist's father walks in the rain. He somehow discovered that his wife and son rented an apartment in the city. Immediately, he decides to go meet them both to get revenge. Upon leaving the building's entrance, the protagonist's mother is startled to see something unexpected, for the scene unfolding is not typical. Inside the dungeon, the protagonist felt exhausted. It was the 5th time he had defeated the monsters, but they kept returning. To make matters worse, he gained no experience points from defeating reanimated creatures. The protagonist realized he needed to find a way to end it quickly. Otherwise, his energy would run out and he would be at the mercy of the monsters. Bai Yi noticed that the regeneration ability was not limited to just the smaller monsters. Next, he activated his acceleration ability to intensify the combat. He tried to attack the enemies with a speed superior to their regeneration capacity. However, even when delivering critical blows, his efforts had no effect. Even the bosses possessed an instant healing ability. Even after having their heads severed, they refused to die. Faced with this, Bai Yi considered the situation extremely unbalanced. After all, not even S-rank healers were capable of such a feat. He supposed that someone was strengthening this power, or that there was a location with infinite energy storage. While he pondered, one of the monsters decided to attack. Bai Yi managed to defend himself, but barely. He realized that the boss had copied his fighting pattern and was imitating his movements. To the protagonist's surprise, the monster in front of him began to speak, declaring that its opponent was strong. Bai Yi was startled, as he had never heard a monster speak before. He reasoned that a plant-themed demonic lair like this could only have an energy center, and concluded that this center was the giant tree the monster protected. He then decided to test his theory. He believed that the monster's healing power would cease when there was no more energy to feed them. The monster, realizing the protagonist's intention, tried to stop him. However, Bai Yi quickly cut down the trees, believing this would give him the necessary advantage. Bai Yi understood that the trees were the enemy's true source of power. Despite the boss's attempts to stop him, he quickly advanced and cut down all the trees. He believed this action would give him the necessary advantage to defeat the monsters. The enemies tried to react but couldn't reach him in time. This was because Bai Yi, after cutting off their power source, immediately froze them. With the enemies immobilized exactly where he wanted them, Bai Yi now had the freedom to attack without worry. Bai Yi knew there had been something wrong with his initial strategy, but he had now corrected the problem. Indeed, as soon as the trees fell, the enemy's power drastically diminished. He managed to defeat one of the enemies, gaining a considerable amount of experience. Upon witnessing his twins fall, the other monster managed to break free from the ice. However, Bai Yi showed no concern. After all, he no longer saw that boss as a significant threat. To his surprise, the boss surrendered and asked to be eliminated. Bai Yi considered it the first time he had witnessed such behavior from a boss. Regardless, he would grant the monster's request. Thus, he defeated the enemy and collected the dropped material, a poisonous thorn essential for forging the infinite poison spear, a weapon of great power. After the boss's defeat, the dungeon entrance opened again. However, before leaving, Bai Yi noticed that his level had increased considerably and that he was about to acquire a new class. Yet, as soon as the transformation was complete, he realized it was a blue class, a flower summoner type. He wasn't very pleased, but he considered it positive that the class didn't require many attributes, even though he wasn't very familiar with its powers. What truly caught his attention, however, was this class's ability to make contracts with evil spirits. With this information, Bai Yi concluded that perhaps the bosses he had just defeated could become his allies. Next, he spotted the enemy's souls hovering over their bodies and approached to speak with them. Thus, Bai Yi activated the spirit contract ability. Now, the twins were under his command and could appear whenever Bai Yi needed them. Sometime later, Bai Yi's father's phone rang. Officer Chen informed him that he had secured a spot for Bai Yi at Captain Hong's dinner. Immediately, Bai Yi confirmed his attendance, promising to bring a meaningful gift, as he saw it as a chance to return to the guild. After hanging up the call, he considered that it was indeed his lucky day. Next, he decided it would be good to visit his sister. Meanwhile, Bai Yi's mother remained worried. However, Bai Yi arrived home and asked her what she was doing standing in the rain. He approached her, saying he would take her inside. Once inside the house, she received a gift from her son. Bai Yi explained that his delay was because he was looking for the best Mother's Day gift. However, she felt that her son was hiding something and was determined to find out the truth. Meanwhile, Bai Yi went to his room to rest. He pondered that, at the moment, he possessed 3 distinct classes. 2 of them had reached rank D, but he considered that it was still not enough, for he knew that sooner or later he would find his father, and knowing him well, he imagined that he might have bribed one of the guards to get out early. For this reason, Bai Yi had been preparing in advance, convinced that he couldn't be too careful. The next day, he headed to another dungeon, convinced that before starting serious training, he needed to solve his immediate problem. Fleeing was not an option. Therefore, his only option was to rank up and strengthen himself whenever he had the opportunity. That's why he always sought out dungeons above his current level. He believed that only then would he be able to face a greater evil, because to confront a powerful enemy, it was essential to be properly prepared. At the School of the Awakened, Professor Huang announced that the assessment results had been released. She informed them that Bai Yi and Qi Yin had secured first and second place in the school, respectively, with the highest scores, and that recordings of their performances had been sent to the guild for review. Because of this performance, both earned a spot in the training journey. Furthermore, due to Bai Yi's excellent result, they would have an audience with the Divine Guild. Not even Bai Yi had expected this. The possibility of meeting the guild in person had not even crossed his mind. His classmates celebrated the achievement, believing that Bai Yi was destined for great things. After class, in the principal's office, Hong Liang asked his nephew Hong Qiangsheng if he was sure he didn't want to accompany the other two. Principal Hong Liang mentioned that the boy's father had finally shown up to see him, suggesting that Qiangsheng could use the situation as an excuse to go to headquarters and join the training journey. Hong Qiangsheng, however, stated that he had placed third and did not want to go to headquarters without earning it himself, as everyone would then think he depended on his father for everything. His uncle appreciated his nephew's attitude and hoped that Qiangsheng's father would notice the boy's maturity. However, Hong Qiangsheng made a request. He wanted access to the sealed Rank D dungeon in the back mountain, as he would use it to grow stronger. Meanwhile, it was revealed that Xiling was the school's general director's nephew. Unlike Qiangsheng, Xiling pleaded with his uncle, General Director Zi Yunqing, to let him participate in the training journey, claiming to be the sole heir of the Zi family. Zi Yunqing noted that the young man was the last of his lineage, but still acted on impulse. He then asked why he had acted that way during the simulated combat. The general director knew very well that Xiling had manipulated the monster to harm the novices. He stated that the superiors were not fools, and that Xiling's belief that he would go unnoticed after what he did was disrespectful to them. He added that, as general director, he managed to cover up his nephew's actions, but emphasized that if Xiling were not family, he would no longer be studying there. Upon hearing all this, Xiling broke down in tears, begging for forgiveness. His uncle, however, did not want to hear excuses, explaining that he only covered for him because, in a way, his nephew's actions had been useful. He revealed that because of Xiling's actions, the superiors had noticed Bai Yi even more, and now began to suspect there was something unusual about that boy. The general director stated that Bai Yi's evolution was inexplicable, and because of this, someone from the guild wished to meet him personally. He also informed them that he would allow his nephew, Xiling, to participate in the training journey, but he warned him to stay in line, otherwise not even he would be able to protect him. Xiling was excited to learn that he would be going to the guild. Since he hadn't managed to harm Bai Yi the last time, he would have another chance. Furthermore, Xiling also wanted to settle scores with Hele and the others. Meanwhile, Bai Yi's friends were excited for him. They believed that an invitation to join the school's strongest guild was not for just anyone. After all, candidates usually went through several tests and many were not selected, but Bai Yi had been invited directly. Such an invitation was rarely distributed, which, in the eyes of others, only demonstrated how special Bai Yi was. However, Bai Yi showed no interest whatsoever. He took the invitation he received and threw it in the trash in front of everyone. Obviously, no one understood Bai Yi's attitude, but he simply turned his back and left. His classmates were perplexed. However, the most studious classmate had already understood everything. He commented that Bai Yi probably had no intention of joining anyone. From the way he was acting now, his goal was to lead, not to be a subordinate. After class, Bai Yi headed to the mountain behind the school. He had gained access to the Rank D lairs and knew that no one else would appear there at night. Accompanying him was Hong Qiangsheng, who was responsible for the authorization. Bai Yi had arranged everything in advance, but he thought it best to enter alone, believing that only he could face such a challenge. However, Hong Qiangsheng refused to just observe and wanted to enter as well. Bai Yi had promised to teach Hong Qiangsheng how to evolve quickly, on the condition that he gained access to this lair. He just didn't imagine that he would gain access to all the Rank D dungeons in the school. In any case, the two entered, and Hong Qiangsheng showed difficulty in fighting. Bai Yi even offered help, but Hong Qiangsheng refused, stating that he could manage on his own. As he watches Hong Qiangsheng fight, Bai Yi reflects on his situation. He still hasn't met the requirements to access the warrior's tower, and therefore cannot enter it. Having practically cleared all the lairs he found, the school's dungeons are his only option at the moment. He knows that the higher an awaken's rank, the more experience is needed to level up. After reaching Rank D, evolution escalation becomes progressively slower. Noticing that Hong Changsheng was in trouble, Bai Yi decides to intervene, which annoys the boy. Despite this, Hong Changsheng finally reaches rank D and realizes that training away from his family's bodyguards is much more effective. Bai Yi also evolves, reaching rank C, and thinks that, with his current attributes, he can handle the pending problem without difficulty. Upon arriving home, Bai Yi's mother asks if he has been going out with any girls. Bai Yi replies that he hasn't, claiming he is still in middle school. Then, his mother questions why he is arriving so late. She explains that it's normal to like someone, and if that's the case, advises him to pursue love without fear, as he will regret it if he lets the opportunity pass. Bai Yi thinks there was only one girl in his life he truly cared about, He-la, his former team member. She always courted him during missions, but Bai Yi always pushed her away. Even with all her advances, the protagonist saw her only as a friend. Furthermore, he was the team captain and took his work seriously, not seeing any possibility of romance between them. However, when he saw her perish before his eyes, it left him deeply furious. In his past life, his master saved him from death row, and soon after he met Hai Liu in the capital of the Sacred Kingdom. But now, Bai Yi doesn't even know where she is, and imagines that, in this life, it will be difficult to find her again. After all, only he remembers what happened in his past life. Now, both are complete strangers to each other, even if they meet again. What Bai Yi doesn't know is that He Li is closer than he imagines. She receives information that Bai Yi hasn't responded to any of her messages and is ignoring the guild. He Li thinks the situation is getting even more interesting and concludes that she will have to speak with Bai Yi personally. Finally, Bai Yi's birthday arrives. His mother hands him the promised gift. Upon opening the box, Bai Yi finds the wrapping, and inside it, a card from his mother. He notices the gift is a scarf but finds it odd, as it is still summer. He then asks his mother if she knew he was about to go to the sacred realm. She confirms, explaining that the sacred realm is quite cold and that he would need to dress warmly. Bai Yi then realizes that his mother knew about his plans all along and that there was no point in trying to hide anything anymore. Still, his mother suggests that, since it's his birthday, he should invite friends to celebrate. Bai Yi insists that he has no friends. However, back at his school, Bai Yi is surprised. One of his old friends appears with a gift, an action figure of his favorite model, which he hands to Bai Yi. The nerd also approaches with a gift and hands him a special item. Bai Yi sees that it is the original tape of his favorite movie and is impressed. He recalls that, in his past life, he and the nerd used to skip class to watch old movies, and he is surprised that his classmate still remembers this. The nerd asks Bai Yi not to let the teachers find out and hopes he likes the gift. Bai Yi thanks him, as he truly liked it very much. To his surprise, Chi Yin also appears with a gift. Bai Yi's classmates are shocked to see him receive a gift from a girl. Furthermore, they realize that the gift is an enchanted gem, a rank A weapon. Bai Yi argues that it is too valuable and that he cannot accept it. Chi Yin explains that if it weren't for him, she wouldn't have been selected for the training journey, and that is why she would like to thank him appropriately. She adds that the item is not that valuable to her family and that it would be much more useful to Bai Yi than to anyone else. Bai Yi considers that, indeed, it would be a waste to refuse something like that. He imagines that Chi Yin chose the gift after seeing him use a more basic magic weapon, and he notices the girl's attention to detail. Furthermore, he feels touched to notice that, even with his cold demeanor, all his friends remembered his birthday and brought him gifts. Meanwhile, the boys wonder since when Chi Yin and Bai Yi became so close. Curious, Chi Yin asks what they are talking about. Thinking of a way to return the kindness, Bai Yi invites everyone to dinner, stating that the meal would be on him. With the protagonist's dinner invitation, the friends were very surprised and happy. Meanwhile, the protagonist noticed some high school students nearby, approaching his classroom. Outside, these students were commenting about the guild leader's visit to the school and were eagerly awaiting a glimpse of her, known for her beauty. Understanding the situation, the protagonist realized that all that commotion was because of him. He decided that it was best to resolve the situation as quickly as possible. Amidst the confusion, Zilling was also awaiting the arrival of the guild leader. With growing anger, Zilling wondered if Bai Yi was really so important that the guild leader would want to speak with him personally. At that moment, the protagonist arrived in the corridor. Suddenly, a swift figure shot through the middle of the students. The protagonist was surprised, as the figure was moving with impressive speed, leaving a trail of impact wherever it went. Bai Yi interpreted that as a mere distraction and prepared himself for combat. The moment he drew his dagger, the figure moved in the opposite direction. Bai Yi realized that he was facing an extremely fast opponent and managed to defend himself in time to avoid being hit. Unlike him, the others could barely keep up with what was happening. At that moment, He-la revealed herself. She retreated after the counterattack and stated that Bai Yi's reflexes were truly impressive, believing she had made the right choice in inviting him to her guild. Upon seeing He Li, the protagonist was in shock, as he definitely did not expect that appearance. He Lu explained that her guild had sent several invitations, but since Bai Yi hadn't responded, she decided to appear in person to talk. Seeing Bai Yi being confronted, his colleagues thought he wouldn't have the courage to reject the girl directly, as it would be an awkward situation. He Lu considered it better to introduce herself formally, but before she could do so, Bai Yi ran and hugged her. Witnessing the scene, everyone around was in shock, including Xiling, who couldn't believe what he saw. For his part, Bai Yi expressed his happiness at seeing He Lei again after such a long time. Obviously, she didn't understand his reaction, much less the others, since no one expected Bai Yi to suddenly hug the guild leader. The nerdy colleague commented that, although it didn't seem like it, He Lei was the same age as Bai Yi. She had been in the same class as them, but awakened her abilities earlier. Turning back to He Lei, she pulled away, visibly embarrassed. However, she asked if she could interpret that hug as a yes to her invitation. She argued that the guild could offer everything Bai Yi needed, including resources for him to become stronger. Bai Yi stated that he would not join the guild, as it made no sense to him. He explained that he would soon create his own guild, and when that happened, perhaps they could fight side by side. Next, the guild's vice leader appeared. He informed them that Captain Hong had returned to campus and that the board had requested they welcome him. At that, He Lei told Bai Yi that they would meet again on the training trip. That way they could talk better, including about the fact that he had mentioned they hadn't seen each other in a long time. Seeing her walk away, Xiling seethed with rage. Not only him, but everyone present witnessed what happened and began to comment, mainly because instead of pushing Bai Yi away, He Lei treated him well after the hug. This generated gossip among the students. Bai Yi himself didn't imagine that would happen, and acted on impulse. In his previous life, his team members never talked about each other's pasts. For this reason, Bai Yi never knew that He Lu had studied at the same school as him. However, he thought that this was, without a doubt, the most unusual birthday he had ever had. After class, Bai Yi took his friends to the steakhouse as promised. While the boys enjoyed their meal, Chi Yin asked Bai Yi if he would really form a guild and what he meant by saying he wouldn't stay there for long. Bai Yi replied that after the training journey, he intended to remain in the sacred realm. Then, his nerdy friend asked if Bai Yi would drop out of college to open the guild. Bai Yi clarified that it wasn't quite like that. In fact, he intended to try to join the Divine Weapon Academy, located in the Sacred Realm. Meanwhile, at the Kaibin Hotel, Captain Hong arrived. His colleagues greeted him with great enthusiasm. In turn, Captain Hong enjoyed being flattered so much. He entered the hotel lobby, accompanied by the police captain. However, the police captain was surprised to see Bai Lingsheng present at the party. He questioned his subordinate why that man was out of prison earlier than expected. The colleague explained that Mr. Bai had paid double the bail with the commander's approval and asked the vice captain to turn a blind eye. The vice captain was not at all pleased with the situation, especially with Bai Lingsheng being present at Captain Hong's welcome party. The subordinate added that Mr. Bai had been unfairly expelled from the guild and was now trying to return to the corporation. To attempt his return, Bai Lingsheng brought all his assets with him. However, his valuable ores were of no use, as Captain Hong was not pleased to see him again. He claimed that the Divine Guild had reserved the entire venue exclusively for its members, and therefore did not want a mongrel like Bai Lingsheng among them. While picking up the ores from the floor, Bai Lingsheng tried to explain himself. However, Captain Hong grabbed him by the collar and said that, with the reputation Bai Lingsheng had, he shouldn't be so shameless as to try to buy a spot in the guild. He ordered him to get out of his sight and never return. Captain Hong ordered that from that moment on, no one should allow that individual to approach the group. Extremely humiliated by the captain's words, Bai Lingsheng erupted in a rage. He swore revenge for having been so scorned. Enraged, Bai Lingsheng left the hotel. As he walked down the street, he devised various ways to make those who had humiliated him pay. Meanwhile, the protagonist's mother left home. By an unfortunate twist of fate, she and Bai Lingsheng unexpectedly met. Meanwhile, the protagonist was still at the restaurant. He observed some members of the Divine Guild. One of his friends commented that if Bai Yi joined the guild, he could become as prestigious as those men, and perhaps even surpass them. For his part, the protagonist thought the day had been exceptionally good. He wondered if fate was gifting him on his birthday. However, he couldn't shake off a strange premonition, as if something terrible was about to happen. While he toasted with with his friends. His mother was in trouble far away. Bai Lingsheng, consumed by rage, had found a target to vent his frustrations. He murmured that his wife was enjoying life while he was going through difficulties. He wanted to remind her of the consequences of not acting according to his rules. When he saw his wife wearing a bracelet, Bai Lingsheng questioned who had given it to her. The bracelet on her wrist radiated a subtle glow. Frightened, the woman froze. At that instant, Bai Lingsheng burst into laughter, declaring that he now understood why she lived in such a luxurious apartment. He accused her of having found another man. Consumed by fury, he advanced to assault the defenseless woman. However, the bracelet that Bai Yi had given his mother reacted in time. From the magical object, a creature emerged, preventing Bai Lingsheng from continuing his attack. They were the twins whom the protagonist had previously defeated, now serving as guardian spirits for his mother. The woman herself was unaware of this fact and was surprised by the scene. Bai Yi had planned everything in advance, as he valued preparation. Next, the twin spirits initiated a confrontation with the aggressor, pushing him away from their protected one. Initially, Bai Lingsheng retreated, as he had been struck by the guardians. However, he declared that he had found the perfect way to unleash his anger. Meanwhile, Bai Yi remained at the restaurant until he felt the amulet on his chest vibrate. Immediately, he deduced that something serious was happening. He rushed towards his mother. Shortly before, he had called Hong Qiangsheng, asking if the young man had discovered anything about the matter they discussed. Hong Qiangsheng confirmed that the protagonist's father had indeed been released earlier than expected, and had even attended Captain Hong's reception party. However, after being expelled from the party, he had not been seen by anyone since. Bai Yi tried to call his mother, but she did not answer, which made him deduce what was happening. Immediately, he headed home, using a bicycle to arrive more quickly. The protagonist knew that even though he had left the twins with their mother, their power level was inferior to their father's, meaning they would only be able to delay him. Meanwhile, Bai Lingsheng had already defeated one of the twins and still had enough energy to continue the fight. The twin, already on the ground, tried to stop him. However, Bai Lingsheng definitively eliminated the twin, using brutality to do so. With one of the twins out of combat, he declared that he would do the same to the other. As Bai Lingsheng advanced towards the remaining opponent, the guardian perceived the imminent danger and used his abilities to try and immobilize him. As he did so, he begged the protagonist's mother to run without looking back. She was quite frightened, but decided to obey and fled the scene. The guardian, in turn, used his own body to try and contain the threat. However, Bai Lingsheng was stronger and didn't take long to break free. After breaking free, he stated that his wife would have no way of escaping him. He then caught up to the woman and asked, "Where do you think you're going?" Bai Lingsheng declared that there was nowhere for her to run. He noticed the jade pendant around the woman's neck and forcibly took the object from her. Believing the object to be just another gift, Bai Lingsheng destroyed the necklace. He then advanced on the woman without mercy. However, what Bai Lingsheng didn't know was that the pendant served as protection, and upon breaking it, Bai Yi immediately appeared to save his mother. Even so, the protagonist's mother was frightened to see her son's sudden arrival. Not only her, but Bai Lingsheng was also startled. Angry, the protagonist declared that this would be the last time Bai Lingsheng would lay a hand on his family, and that he would put a definitive end to the entire situation. In the past, the last time Bai Yi's parents fought, the situation became critical. He tried to intervene, but he was chained. He then had to watch everything, powerless. His mother had taken him for a walk and forgotten to inform her husband. Bai Lingsheng had gone out to look for a job, but he was unsuccessful. Upon returning, furious, he took out his anger on his wife. Witnessing all of that, Bai Yi became so traumatized that he underwent a second activation. He broke free from the chains and tried to protect his mother. Bai Lingsheng even tried to attack him too. However, the fury the protagonist felt at that moment gave him strength. Thus, he put an end to his family's suffering. However, on that same day, he lost both his father and his mother. Since then, he lived without a family. But in this life, he wishes to act differently, and he believes he will never again be helpless when it comes to protecting those he loves. Now, Bai Lingsheng is no longer facing a defenseless target. Bai Lingsheng expressed surprise, stating that he had not expected it. However, he considered his son's appearance opportune, as he intended to eliminate him as well. The protagonist, however, showed no fear. On the contrary, he launched an attack with great intensity. Upon being hit, Bai Lingsheng recoiled, but what caught his attention the most was seeing the young man using his kunwu blade. He truly wondered who had taken possession of his weapon. In any case, Bai Yi instructed the twins to take care of their mother and lead her to safety. Bai Lingsheng then realized that the invocations came from his son, finding the discovery extremely interesting. This meant that the young man was a dual elementalist. He claimed that such a feat was expected from a son of his. However, he stated that inheriting his father's talent would not be enough. After all, he would not forget what the young man had done, and he would not not go unpunished without proper retribution. Bai Lingsheng declared that the young man was overstepping his bounds, but that he would teach him to have more respect for his elders. Having said that, Bai Lingsheng launched his attack. The protagonist's mother showed concern for her son. However, Bai Yi was prepared. He used his ice ability to slow down the aggressor. Bai Lingsheng did not understand how that had happened. Next, the protagonist revealed that he did not possess only 2 classes. He added that it had no relation whatsoever to Bai Lingsheng, as the power came from himself. Finally, Bai Yi declared that the man in front of him meant nothing to him but complete trash. Bai Lingsheng, however, declared that he did not feel intimidated. He argued that despite Bai Yi possessing multiple classes, the boy lacked the combat experience that he, the father, possessed. He added that it was no coincidence that he, and not his son, was the head of the family. Upon witnessing Bai Lingsheng free himself, Bai Yi attacked him again, and did not cease the attack until the aggressor was completely subdued. Bai Lingsheng in turn realized that his defense had been breached and that he had been hit. Irritated, he questioned how the boy had managed such a feat. Bai Yi simply replied that he owed the old man no explanations. After all, they were no longer family. He added that it would be better for Bai Lingsheng to stay away from his mother from now on, otherwise he would not be so merciful. Bai Lingsheng began to laugh at the situation. He claimed that he had always strived to provide for the family, and all he received from his family was ingratitude. He also stated that as long as he was alive, Bai Yi would always be his son, no matter what happened. However, Bai Yi did not agree with that statement. He attacked, throwing Bai Lingsheng away. Bai Lingsheng even tried to retaliate, but he couldn't even get close to Bai Yi to hit him. Upon being hit, Bai Lingsheng wondered how his son, a newly awakened, had become so strong in such a short time. After all, Bai Lingsheng himself was a red class rank C, and he shouldn't be defeated by his own son. Bai Yi told the old man that he had no chance at all, and that it would be better for Bai Lingsheng not to resist. The protagonist stated that throughout his entire life, Bai Lingsheng had always resorted to violence. However, he had never faced anyone his equal. He preferred to unleash his anger on defenseless people. Therefore, the protagonist declared that an individual like Bai Lingsheng did not deserve to have a family. Furthermore, he added that Bai Lingsheng did not even deserve to be called a man. Consumed by rage, the protagonist slammed Bai Lingsheng's face into the ground. The protagonist's mother watched the scene, impressed as she had never seen her son act that way. Defeated, Bai Lingsheng asked the boy to reconsider. He argued that, above all, he was the one who had raised Bai Yi from the beginning, and that the boy should at least consider the blood ties that bound them. However, the protagonist questioned whether such a blood tie had ever prevented Bai Lingsheng from assaulting his own family. He stated that Bai Lingsheng had always been cruel. No matter how much his son or wife begged for mercy, he never showed compassion. Furthermore, he always acted with extreme violence, never once reflecting that he was doing all of that to his own family. Consequently, whenever Bai Lingsheng was around, they never had a single day of normalcy. Therefore, he had no right to argue in his own favor, because a man who committed such acts did not deserve to have a family. Prostrate on the ground, Bai Lingsheng apologized. He claimed to recognize his mistakes and promised not to commit them again. However, witnessing that, the protagonist remembered something. In his past life, Bai Lingsheng had acted the same way. When he realized he was no match for his own son, he feigned repentance. But when Bai Yi let his guard down, he was attacked by his father. Now, the protagonist thought he would not fall for the same trick twice. His adrenaline was pumping, and he concluded that there was only one way to end it. Bai Yi's mother tries to stop him from committing an irreversible act. However, Bai Yi argues that there is only one way for a sinner to truly repent for his mistakes, to ensure he never has another chance to err. Seeing imminent death, Bai Lingsheng tries to negotiate for his life. However, his pleas are in vain, as Bai Yi remains unyielding in his determination. He invokes his ice powers and silences Bai Lingsheng. Bai Yi reflects that he had reached this point before, and there is no reason to hesitate now. Suddenly, he hears his mother's voice, pleading with him not to proceed. The guardian beast had lent its voice to Bai Yi's mother. Through it, the mother asks her son not to become a person as cruel as his father. She argues that Bai Lingsheng has already lost his most precious possession, his pride. He will live regretful and resentful for the rest of his life, and that in itself will be his punishment. The mother adds that she does not wish to see her son transform into a monster, as that is exactly what will happen if Bai Yi goes through with his plans. Furthermore, she does not want to have to visit him in prison, as that is where he will go if he fulfills his desire. Bai Yi is finally convinced, but declares that he will find a way to ensure Bai Lingsheng is never a threat again. He then uses an ability known as Judgment. By striking Bai Lingsheng with this ability, Bai Yi manages to prevent him from using his awakened abilities again. From that moment on, Bai Lingsheng becomes an ordinary man, devoid of powers. Bai Yi orders him to leave the city and never reappear in his life. He also warns that, should the old man disobey this order and try to approach his mother, the guardian will be present to defend her. Furthermore, Bai Yi promises that if the old man commits any hostile act again, he will show no mercy, even if it means going to prison. Faced with this ultimatum, Bai Lingsheng has no choice but to obey. Sometime later, Bai Yi was already home. He entrusted the twins with taking very good care of his mother. Bai Yi commented that he had arrived in time to save her, otherwise something terrible could have happened. However, his mother reassured him, stating that everything was fine. Even so, Bai Yi remained worried and said he would need to get another pendant for her. His mother thanked him for his concern. However, Bai Yi was startled to hear her voice again. This time, however, it wasn't the guardian's voice, but his own mother's voice. His mother didn't know how it had happened, but the guardian spirit explained that her loss of voice was due to an old wound, which he had managed to heal. Sometime later, the guardian asked Bai Yi if he would really leave and abandon his mother after everything that had happened. Bai Yi explained that he had already paid the rent and that when he saved enough, he would buy the property outright. Furthermore, he had already prepared a new pendant for her. However, he would still need the twins to protect her full time. He added that his mother knew he was leaving for a good cause. What she didn't know was about his past life and all the experiences he had already lived through. Despite everything, Bai Yi still carried a great hatred, mainly due to what had happened to him and his team in the past. Because of this, he felt the need to go to the sacred realm, as it was there he would find his revenge. This time, he would arrive at the sacred realm earlier than the first time, and that could be an advantage. Even without knowing if he would be able to return or achieve his goals, he was willing to drop everything and go there. While walking with his mother through the city, she commented that she had almost forgotten to pray. For every year, on the first full moon of the summer holidays, the great mage of the flower goddess temple returned to Chushi City. Bai Yi had even forgotten that his mother was a devotee of the flower goddess. He also hadn't told her when he would leave, as he thought it better to go in silence. After all, the one thing he was least good at was saying goodbye. Sometime later, the protagonist's friend received news of the successful surgery to correct his problem. The boy's parents were very grateful for this. He, for his part, thought it was not such a big deal. His mother disagreed, stating that such procedures are not simple and that they should be grateful, but she advised him to rest for a good recovery. The young man did not want to have the surgery at that moment as his friends were leaving, and he wished to at least say goodbye. The next day, Chi Yin's mother said goodbye to her, asking her daughter not to let her father work late when she saw him. The school official said that the students would only be traveling for 15 days, and therefore parents should not act as if they would not see them again. Meanwhile, the protagonist waited for the train alone. His teacher noticed this and asked if Bai Yi's parents couldn't accompany him. The protagonist simply replied no. Wang, the teacher, inquired if he had always been so independent. Bai Yi thought his teacher truly had no idea of his situation, but he decided it was better that way. He had gotten used to being alone a long time ago. After losing his family, Bai Yi also lost his best friend, and just as he was getting used to his teammates, he also lost everyone on that fateful day. Due to so many losses, he became accustomed to dealing with pain in silence. Therefore, he disliked goodbyes and preferred to act in his own way. Professor Huang announced the train's arrival, instructing everyone to prepare. Focused, Bai Yi could only think about his journey. Suddenly, a familiar voice called his name. Looking back, he was surprised by what he saw, something he hadn't expected. His mother, accompanied by his friends, had appeared to say goodbye. Linlu had managed to escape the hospital just to see him, warning that he would be in trouble if his parents found out. Bai Yi reprimanded his nerdy friend, reminding him that he needed to recover from surgery. Linlu insisted that he was fine, but admitted that worry had brought him there to advise Bai Yi to be careful on his trip. His friends, showing affection, made sure to bring clothes and food for Bai Yi. Even the class representative expressed her joy at seeing how much Bai Yi was loved. Bai Yi's mother also brought a gift, a bracelet from the goddess temple, stating that it would protect him. She explained that, just as her son had once given her a gift, she wanted to return the favor with something that would help him on his journey. Bai Yi realized that his mother had gone to the temple for him, and considered the possibility that she already knew he didn't intend to return home anytime soon. Professor Huang then announced that the the train was about to depart and that all students should board. Bai Yi said goodbye to his friends and family and boarded the train, ready to travel. He reflected on how much things had changed since his return, including the people close to him. Unlike before, Bai Yi felt that someone was waiting for his return. He then thought that perhaps it would be best to return as soon as possible, after resolving everything. Not far from there, a man watched the train depart. He noticed that Bai Yi had boarded safely and that the item had been successfully delivered. It was Lu Zhongjiang, the patriarch of the flower goddess temple. Now, he thought that the rest depended solely on Bai Yi. Inside the carriage, the professor explained that the guild was handling the sea crossing and that they would soon reach the border of the Zhang kingdom. With that, the training journey officially began. She informed them that it would take a day to enter the sacred kingdom, and that, according to tradition, they would spend the night at the border to conduct a field training exercise. Upon hearing this, Ziling became excited, thinking that this training would be a true spectacle. Professor Huang explained that the gods, creators, and protectors of this world granted supreme power to the divine families. Currently, the sacred realm is home to 2 gods and their families, and for this reason, everyone entering the country must strictly follow divine laws. To access the sacred realm from the Zhang kingdom, it is necessary to pass through 3 checkpoints. They had just overcome the first one. Upon boarding the train, all students received a special invitation issued by the sacred realm. Now, the students were arriving at the second border checkpoint. There, everyone would have to register their information and undergo a complete security check. Normally, this process took an entire day, and only after its completion could they continue their journey. The next day, it was time for the first combat training on the coastal border of the Zhang kingdom. Qi Yin noticed the protagonist wearing a new outfit and commented that he looked older. Some girls approached, recognizing the protagonist as the young man who refused the school's supreme guild. Finding Bai Yi handsome, they tried to approach him for a conversation. They were older students, and due to rumors, everyone already knew who Bai Yi was. However, Bai Yi was not interested in conversation and left them talking to themselves. Bai Yi only thought that the beasts of the desolate land were too weak and would not help him rank up, which would hinder his level advancement. At that moment, an older student approached, boasting that he had also been the best student in his time, and stated that fighting the beasts in that location was no big deal. His name was Zhang Jun, and he claimed that fighting beasts in real combat was much more challenging. Upon hearing this, the girls began to show interest. They cast their charm on Zhang Jun, as Bai Yi knew they only wanted to be protected. In any case, Professor Huang reinforced that the students on that journey were part of the school's elite. She instructed the students to train only in the designated area, avoid acting alone, and return to the camp to finish training by 8 in the evening. Excited, Zhang Jun said he had heard these rules many times and went ahead with the 2 girls. Ziling was also excited, always showing an expression of someone planning mischief. Meanwhile, in the sacred realm, Captain Hong arrived at a certain location, where an ally informed him that Captain Shannon was waiting for him. The Supreme Guild's vice leader considered it a privilege for his guild to use the same train as the captain, as they thus did not have to pass through the checkpoints. In turn, the captain instructed Hong Qiangsheng to wait with the squad. With that, the young man had no choice but to obey. Back in the desolate land, Zhang Jun was showcasing his powers. The fawning girls were happy to be on his team. Meanwhile, Bai Yi focused on his own training. He thought that to level up, he would need to face stronger beasts, but he knew he wouldn't find them there. Furthermore, defeating low-level beasts was not worth his time and effort. Amidst this situation, Zhang Jun was hit by a creature stronger than him. When he was injured, he wasn't even supported by the girls. They were in shock and couldn't react. At that moment, Bai Yi became the creature's next target and, unlike the others, had no intention of retreating. With a single blow, Bai Yi eliminated the threat. The protagonist disdained the defeated monster so much that he didn't even care about its spoils. Bai Yi knew that location offered no challenges worthy of him, so he decided to seek a more formidable opponent. After some time, he found some magic crystals. However, he noticed that these crystals concentrated great energy and usually formed in demonic lairs or areas infested by beasts. The magic in the crystals, however, was almost depleted, suggesting it had been drained some time ago. The trees in the region also seemed to have been drained. Bai Yi wondered what kind of enemy would be capable of absorbing such immense energy. After walking for a while longer, he reached the end of the trail. Upon inspecting the area more closely, he found a strange flask on the ground. On the object, there was an inscription indicating it belonged to Zifeng Industries. As night fell, it was time to conclude the training. The teacher prepared dinner for the students, using beast meat. She explained that combat training simulated life in the wild, and finding food like that was an essential part of survival in a hostile environment. Some students were reluctant to eat monster meat, while others did not hesitate. Meanwhile, the students noticed that Bai Yi had not yet returned to the camp. Qi Yin expressed surprise, praising the teacher for being not only good at theory, but also at applying her teachings in practice. Huang revealed that, before becoming a teacher, she had studied to join the Divine Guild. However, she was not considered good enough to pass the test. The teacher confided in the class representative that it was her first time in the sacred realm, asking for secrecy. Huang added that, thanks to Qi Yin and Bai Yi, she finally had the opportunity to visit the place she had always dreamed of seeing. While she was talking, Qi Yin barely noticed something approaching. Unlike the student, the teacher perceived the danger and quickly managed to protect Qi Yin in time. However, the teacher herself ended up being hit by an enemy attack, and Qi Yin witnessed everything before her eyes. Frightened, the other students tried to understand what was happening. Meanwhile, Bai Yi was trying to return to the camp as quickly as possible. He had discovered that a powerful demonic beast was on the loose. However, Bai Yi could not arrive in time, as the teacher was caught off guard. Huang instructed the students to run to the nearest guild. The teacher knew very well that she was facing a rank B demonic beast, and intended to at least distract it while the students fled from danger. On that same day, upon arriving at the location, Xiling put his plan into action. Furious that Bai Yi had stolen all the attention for himself, he sought revenge. To do this, he brought the demonic beast with him and released it to absorb the environment's nutrients. Xiling believed that after the beast acted and everyone was injured or defenseless, he would emerge to save the day, thus earning the fame of a hero. However, the situation spiraled out of control. Xiling found himself helpless, as the beast became more powerful than he had imagined, turning into a problem he could no longer manage. Cowardly, Xiling decided to stay away from the action, leaving the others at the mercy of danger. Due to his recklessness, Professor Huang was the first to be hit, and others were also at risk. While running, the protagonist recalled that in his past life, he had faced a rank S enemy, a monster that had given him a lot of trouble. From that experience, he knew that the current adversary was strong in both defense and attack. Furthermore, the most powerful person there was Professor Huang, but she was rank C, significantly inferior to the rank B beast. The protagonist himself recognized that he would not be able to defeat the creature without using his full potential. However, by doing so, he would reveal his true capabilities to all the students, which could attract the attention of the so-called gods. Turning back to the professor, she realized that the monster had already injured half the class. She also noticed that the creature's attacks caused paralysis. Desperate, she did not know what to do in that situation. The creature, in turn, was feeding on people's energy. Qi Yin was the one who resisted the most, but even she was at the monster's mercy. However, before the creature could attack again, it was hit. Huang declared that she would not allow the monster to approach her students. With that, she became the enemy's primary target, as she had drawn all the attention to herself. The creature advanced to deliver the final blow, but before it could do so, the protagonist arrived in time to save the professor. Bai Yi positions himself in front of the teacher and protects her, counterattacking the enemy. In doing so, he prevents Huang from being defeated. He reflects that his power is still insufficient against such a formidable enemy. For now, he can only control the beast. Next, he attacks the enemy with a blast of ice and manages to freeze the creature completely. However, this action does not go unnoticed, as all the other students witnessed Bai Yi change classes. Bai Yi ponders that there is not much to do. He cannot allow the others to be eliminated, even if it means revealing his secret. Teacher Huang, despite being in the most critical situation, shows concern for her student. Meanwhile, the monster has not yet given up the fight. The creature performs the feat of disappearing before everyone's eyes. The students become truly frightened, but the protagonist knows that the danger has not ceased, as the creature can return at any moment. With his current strength, Bai Yi knows that he cannot defeat the monster, but he can at least seize the opportunity to help the others retreat. The teacher instructs the students to go ahead, as she needs to remain until she is sure everyone has fled, including Xiling, who has not yet returned. Huang is responsible for the students and needs to ensure that no one is left behind. The location and time were agreed upon in advance, and she believes she cannot abandon the camp, leaving anyone behind. However, the protagonist claims that Xiling was responsible for releasing the creature. A flashback reveals that, in the past, the enemy infiltrator in Bai Yi's team was the one who prepared breakfast. Everyone ate without suspecting anything, including Bai Yi, the team leader. The infiltrator barely showed any signs of what was to come, and he relied on this discretion as he needed everyone to ingest the food. On the day of the attack on the team, everyone was paralyzed, unable to react. He had mixed a paralyzing agent into their food for a month, using this perfect tactic to incapacitate his targets. Back in the present, the protagonist did not hesitate to accuse Ziling. He explains that the Zifeng industry belongs to director Ziqing Yun's family and is currently managed by Ziling's father. He adds that the company's laboratory specializes in demonic beast research, using special vials to store miniaturized species. Bai Yi displays the broken vial he found deep in the forest and claims that, among those present, no one but Xiling would have access to such an item, concluding that it could only have been him. Meanwhile, Xiling observes the scene from afar. He realizes that Bai Yi found the vial and regrets not having properly hidden his tracks. Furthermore, Xiling thinks that once again, Bai Yi found a way to thwart him. Consequently, his anger towards the protagonist only intensifies. Returning to the students, everyone starts to turn against Xiling. They state that Xiling should be severely punished for his actions. Xiling hears everything, which only fuels his fury. In any case, the teacher insists that they need to leave there as quickly as possible. She hands a radio to the class representative, leaving her in charge of communication. However, a shot from afar destroys the radio. Qi Yin ends up getting injured in the process. This leaves her teacher even more worried. While some wonder what happened, the protagonist knows very well who did this. Then, a smoke grenade is thrown. A paralyzing gas spreads among the students, and amidst the confusion, Xiling approaches wearing a mask. Xiling approaches the other students, furious with the protagonist. He claims that Bai Yi is the real culprit for the entire situation, as it was he who incited everyone against Xiling and his family. For this reason, no one would leave there alive. However, Bai Yi, unlike the others, is not affected by the gas. He approaches Xiling and asks if he truly plans to get rid of all the students. While some can barely stand due to the smoke, Xiling continues to throw grenades into the area, showing no mercy for his classmates. He reveals that he was saving these grenades to use against the creature, because he, Xiling, was supposed to be the class's savior, not Bai Yi. However, since the protagonist decided to ruin his plan, everyone would pay for having chosen to flatter the wrong student. Xiling points his bow at the protagonist, but before he can shoot, Professor Huang tries to convince him to give up. She states that it is still possible to do the right thing, and that Xiling doesn't need to act that way. After all, she believes that everything was just an accident, because the Xiling she knows would never harm his classmates. In turn, Xiling replies that it's too late, and there's no turning back now. Professor Huang realizes that she can barely move, and that if she continues like this, she will faint like the others. Next, the protagonist inflicts a wound on himself and declares that, in one thing, Xiling is right. There's no turning back from what he has done. He adds that it doesn't matter how wronged Xiling feels, because no excuse Xiling uses justifies his horrendous actions. Angrily, because the situation reminds him of his own past, the protagonist asks how Xiling has the courage to point a weapon at his own companions. Then, Bai Yi defends himself from a fired arrow and advances toward the aggressor. With a precise strike of his sword, he definitively prevents Xiling from firing another arrow. Not only that, but in the process, Xiling's mask breaks, leaving him exposed to the gas. Bai Yi feels no pity, because for him, traitors do not deserve any kind of forgiveness. Xiling, feeling excruciating pain after the attack, accuses Bai Yi of being a lunatic, blaming him for everything that happened. However, the protagonist retorts, stating that it was Xiling who hid amidst the chaos, watching everything from afar, and then questions, who is the real lunatic? Bai Yi claims that Xiling was responsible for causing this tragedy. Furthermore, his attitude put everyone's lives at risk, including Xiling's own well-being, all in the name of pathetic revenge, and almost eliminated a good portion of the students and the teacher, who had nothing to do with the situation. Confronted with the truth, Xiling breaks down in tears. He claims he didn't interfere for fear of not being able to defeat the creature, which is why he remained hidden, and states that he can explain everything. However, the protagonist doesn't want to hear anything more. Bai Yi declares that Xiling has already made his decision, and now it's time to face the consequences. Desperate, Xiling begins to think that Bai Yi is even crazier than him, as he truly intends to eliminate him. However, Bai Yi doesn't do it. Instead, he uses his ability to nullify an individual's powers. Thus, in addition to feeling intense pain, Xiling loses his awakened abilities forever. Bai Yi applied what he deemed necessary, leaving Xiling permanently unable to be a threat. In turn, the spoiled boy, who once had everything he wanted, now finds himself reduced reduced to a crybaby, begging for help. No sooner had one problem been solved than another immediately arose to complicate the protagonist's life. Bai Yi heard his teacher call for help as the previous beast had returned. He considered it a terrible time. Although he was not affected like the others, the gas weakened his movements. What was already difficult now became even more complicated. However, there was no other option but to face the monster. Suddenly, something surprising happened. A lightning bolt appeared out of nowhere and struck the creature directly. The monster was cut from top to bottom but remained standing. Professor Huang exclaimed that He Lo had arrived at the right moment. He Lo, in turn, admitted that the monster was difficult to face alone. Then, she asked Bai Yi if he could help her. Even surprised by the sudden appearance, Bai Yi prepared for the fight. However, the monster used its camouflage. The protagonist explained that the creature possessed a very effective camouflage ability, as he had wounded it before, but it had escaped without a trace. Even with his leg injured, Bai Yi warned that the paralyzing effects of the gas were taking hold, and that everyone would soon fall asleep. Realizing that he was the only one in the class still standing, He Lo was surprised by the protagonist's resistance to the gas's effects. As a precaution, she handed him a first aid potion. He Lo informed him that the guild had been called, but she didn't know when reinforcements would arrive, so they needed to buy time. Bai Yi supposed that the beast was analyzing its targets, waiting for the right moment to attack. His supposition was correct, as the creature attacked shortly thereafter. The protagonist was almost hit head-on. Quickly, He Li attempted a counterattack, but the creature dodged. However, the monster couldn't dodge so many attacks, and ended up being hit by one of them. He Li noticed that Bai Yi had recovered very quickly. The protagonist stated that he was ready to fight, and that if they worked together, they could win. Bai Yi praised He Lo's attacks and reflexes, considering them excellent. However, he reminded her that despite her skills, she was still a student and her safety should be the top priority. He Lo in turn retorted that he acted as if he wasn't a student himself. At that instant, the monster rose again. The protagonist then suggested they attack together. They agreed and synchronized their attacks. This time, however, the situation was different. The monster managed to defend itself effectively and pushed the protagonist away with a blow. He Lo stated that she could attack. However, upon trying to hit the monster, she realized she couldn't break through the enemy's defense at all. Bai Yi, sensing the imminent danger, tried to warn his colleague. However, He Li couldn't get away in time and was hit by the enemy. Furthermore, she noticed that the monster's attacks contained poison. In response, the protagonist blocked the enemy. He pondered that the monster was learning their attack patterns, even managing to protect itself from He Lo's blows. Moreover, the monster was absorbing nutrients from the area, progressively growing stronger. He concluded that if the battle prolonged, they wouldn't be able to hold out until reinforcements arrived. Additionally, He Li had been severely wounded. Bai Yi felt it was his duty to act as quickly as possible. A flashback revealed a past scene where Bai Yi asked his team what the correct course of action would be when the opponent proved superior. On that occasion, He Lo had replied that the correct thing to do would be to retreat, but she emphasized that the Divine Squad never retreated. Bai Yi then explained that for such situations, they had the rat bait plan. The plan involved one member attacking the enemy with full force, provoking a counterattack. This way, the enemy would expend all its energy attacking and defending itself. Meanwhile, another team member would await the opportune moment to deliver the decisive blow and end the fight. Bai Yi managed to attract the monster's attention. Then, he instructed He Lo not to attack immediately, guiding her to focus on recovering her energy. He Lo expressed her reluctance to let him fight alone. She was aware of the risk and, despite Bai Yi's talent, knew that he wouldn't be able to win the fight by himself. However, even as a top-tier gold-level professional, He Lo realized that Bai Yi was in complete control of the situation, acting as the true leader. Bai Yi attacked the monster with intensity. During the attack, he lost his weapon. Witnessing this, He Lo became alarmed. To make matters worse, she saw Bai Yi take a direct hit. Even wounded, Bai Yi ordered her not to act. He Lo was deeply confused, questioning how she could remain inactive while a comrade was severely injured. The creature, in turn, believed it had won. The monster possessed enough consciousness to consider humans inferior, believing that, in the end, they were all just food for its kind. Meanwhile, Bai Yi thought the right moment was near. Then, he finally gave the order for He Lo to act. Immediately, the girl prepared for the attack. Bai Yi had realized that every time the monster was injured, it was trying to devour someone. He understood then that the moment the creature was about to feed was ideal for an attack, as the monster became more vulnerable. Thus, he merely awaited the precise moment for Hilo to finish the task. That way, with a single blow, she could end the fight. Sure enough, the moment the monster was hit, its body became paralyzed. Now, Bai Yi had achieved his goal. After immobilizing the monster, Hilo warned that the paralysis would not last long, urging them to act quickly. Bai Yi responded that it was enough. This time, he would not allow the creature to escape again. Immediately, Bai Yi activated his ability to freeze the enemy. Hilo was surprised to realize that Bai Yi possessed more than one class. By this point, the protagonist no longer hid his true strength. He knew he needed to fight with everything he had to ensure victory. Next, Bai Yi unleashed his most powerful attack. With this blow, he finally defeated the monster and took the opportunity to recover from his injuries. Witnessing this, Hilo reflected that, in that world, few geniuses managed to possess multiple classes. Seeing someone as young and talented as Bai Yi left her even more impressed. The protagonist then revealed that he was not limited to just 2 classes, but as many as he desired. Taking advantage of the monster's defeat, he absorbed its soul to transform it into an ally. Bai Yi now possessed 2 spiritual contracts with creatures, with the possibility of forming 4 more. After contracting the demonic creature as his new ally, the protagonist named it Qiangzai. From that moment on, he could summon Qiangzai whenever he wished. Impressed by Bai Yi's multiple class changes, Hilo asked how far his powers extended. Bai Yi simply asked her to keep everything a secret. Hilo understood that if he hadn't revealed his powers publicly yet, it was because he wished to maintain discretion. She then agreed to keep Bai Yi's secret. Shortly after the cavalry arrived at the location, they were the guild's 26th platoon, and the leader asked if the others were all right. Upon seeing the monster's corpse, the squad leader understood that the threat had been neutralized. All that remained was to send the injured and unconscious to a safe location after they received first aid. The class representative, still frightened, was comforted by the teacher. Meanwhile, the squad leader commented that a monster of that size would be a considerable challenge even for his experienced team. However, 2 students managed to handle the situation. He then understood why both were considered prodigies. After waking up, Jiangjun and the other girls expressed their gratitude for the protagonist's help. Jiangjun added that if it weren't for Bai Yi, he might not be alive at that moment. Meanwhile, Hile was receiving care from a healer who questioned her about why she had advanced alone against the monster. Hile reassured her team, assuring them that the situation was under control. One of her allies commented that the boss should not be underestimated. After all, she was a genius and knew exactly what she was doing. However, Hile thought that, in reality, it hadn't been her who solved everything this time, and she decided to keep that fact a secret. After all, Bai Yi was a truly mysterious person. After the rescue, the students were taken to a safe location. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the jungle, Xiling was running, fleeing another creature that he himself had released. He justified his action by saying that he had released the monster so that it would pursue others and not turn against him. However, Xiling was about to discover that controlling creatures like that was not as simple as he imagined. Sometime later, the students resumed their train journey. The protagonist took the opportunity to study the creature he had captured more thoroughly. Meanwhile, the person in charge of the students reported everything that had happened to his superiors. This made Bai Yi realize that they were constantly under surveillance. After the recent events, it would be even more difficult for him to evolve and conceal his true abilities. In any case, the train finally arrived at the long-awaited Shengye Kingdom. The train, already within the divine realm, arrived at the campus station. The protagonist anxiously awaited what was to come. Bai Yi knew that this was the richest country in his world, which made the difference from his homeland quite evident. The academy's campus director received the students, informing them that he would accompany them during their visit to the Divine Weapon Academy. Bai Yi knew that the Divine Academy was where his enemy had graduated. Calculating the time, he imagined that his enemy should still be studying there, and could barely wait to meet him in person. Sometime later, the students were introduced to the statue of Cadmus Thebes, one of the 5 creator gods of that world. For many, Cadmus Thebes was an idol, as the Thebes family was currently the most powerful in the country, enjoying an invaluable reputation. They were considered special for possessing a direct lineage to a divinity. The campus director explained that Cadmus Thebes had been responsible for defeating a demonic dragon in the past, and that he subsequently founded the Guild of Gods and the Academy itself. The Divine Soldiers Academy was the most prestigious in the world. Consequently, the selected students were truly privileged, but considerable effort was also required of them. In addition to needing to achieve at least rank B, candidates also had to pass an extremely rigorous admission exam. For some students, achieving rank B took a lifetime, which made this level extremely difficult to reach. Furthermore, rank B awakened ones were quite rare, and those who reached this level while still young were acclaimed as geniuses. Bai Yi knew this very well. Even so, his enemy had graduated from that academy, which only proved the adversary's extraordinary strength. In the past, the individual named Chris had been introduced to Bai Yi as a new member of his team. The person responsible for integrating Chris into Bai Yi's team stated that he was the academy's best graduate at that time. For this reason, Bai Yi believed that his enemy should still be studying there, and to be able to face him, it would be necessary for Bai Yi to reach rank B as soon as possible. Bai Yi's goal was not to join the academy for prestige or fame, but rather to become stronger than his enemy, and one day carry out his revenge. Chi-Yin reflects that if her colleague is striving to enter the academy, she will also need to do the same to catch up with him. At that moment, she is approached by a man who questions her about her arrival in the divine realm and why she hasn't visited her father yet. Surprised, Chi-Yin shows embarrassment. The official responsible for student reception greets the man, identifying him as Secretary General Chen. Then, Chen informs Chi-Yin that her father fell ill due to overwork and didn't want to worry anyone, but he believes Chi-Yin should see him as soon as possible. Immediately, Chi-Yin arranges transportation to go meet her father. The students who don't know her well begin to inquire if Chi-Yin belongs to a prestigious family. Soon after, a luxurious limousine parks nearby, leading the students to wonder if everyone there owned such sophisticated vehicles. From inside the limousine, a group of academy students disembarks. The director reprimands them for their delay. However, one of the students explains that, as students of the East Territory's supreme private academy, they need to train in monster lairs at night. He adds that they had an intense training session and ended up oversleeping. The director clarifies that this training journey is conducted in conjunction with different countries and schools, and that these newly arrived students are, in fact, locals from the Shenge Kingdom. The visiting students are visibly impressed. However, the admiration is not reciprocated, as the newly arrived students barely pay attention to the visitors. The group leader declares that all these visitors must be from common, unprestigious families, and therefore do not deserve their attention. Upon hearing this, the visiting students become uncomfortable with how they are being treated. Even Professor Huang considers the attitude excessive. However, the leader of the senior students mocks the others, claiming they are nothing but a bunch of bumpkins. He states that, unlike them, he and his friends are from noble families of the Shenge Kingdom. Therefore, the resources they receive are significantly superior to those of the others. He adds that because they are from a private class, there are only 5 students in their school, and the institution spares no expense for them. But he emphasizes that ordinary students cannot understand this, as they are not privileged. The leader assures them that, unlike the bumpkins, he will certainly enter the Divine Weapon Academy in the future. He justifies this by saying that although he is still in his second year of high school, his level is already almost rank B. For this reason, he and his friends were invited to visit the academy in advance, and he questions the presence of bumpkins on their excursion. One of Hilo's allies felt offended and stated that their group was perfectly capable of competing with any other. However, the leader of the other students, with a tone of superiority, declared that his group had just flawlessly cleared a rank D dungeon, and therefore he didn't see how they could lose to others. An ally of the leader added that a bunch of bumpkins should never have set foot in a dungeon of that level. According to her, it was useless to argue, as they wouldn't even know what that meant. After all, in her view, commoners couldn't possibly understand the language of nobles. She continued, stating that as nobles, they were trained to assume prominent positions, while the others existed only to serve the stronger ones. Meanwhile, Bai Yi, the protagonist, reflected that the position of Divine Blessed was the highest social standing a common person could achieve without belonging to a divine lineage. He had achieved this status in his past life, but he considered it useless, as he ended up being abandoned by the gods he had so flattered. Suddenly, a flying object rapidly approached. Some students immediately recognized it as the exclusive transport of the divine race. They wondered what members of the divine race would be doing in that location. A man emerged from the transport and announced that, apparently, all the students had arrived. Everyone was shocked upon recognizing the figure. It was Lin Feng, the blessed of the renowned Thebes family. As soon as he arrived, Lin Feng asked if Bai Yi was among the students present. The arrogant students, visibly confused, wondered who this Bai Yi could be. Bai Yi, for his part, remained silent. However, Lin Feng already knew him. He knew that Bai Yi had single-handedly cleared a rank D dungeon in the simulation test, and therefore he was eager to meet him. He added that the Thebes family was deeply impressed with the young man's performance. Lin Feng further informed that the family was organizing a hunting competition and invited Bai Yi to attend as a special guest. The arrogant students were in complete shock upon hearing such an invitation. Without further ado, Lin Feng asked Bai Yi to accompany him immediately. 100 years ago, the world was plunged into chaos with the emergence of countless demonic monsters of overwhelming power. 5 powerful deities descended upon Earth, protecting humanity and eradicating the most formidable creatures. Thanks to divine intervention, the human world was preserved. Since then, humanity developed a deep faith and began to worship these deities. To continue protecting humanity, the gods remained in this world, granting them knowledge and power. They established new laws and formed armies capable of confronting the demonic creatures. Furthermore, they united with humans, giving rise to a lineage of divine descendants. These demigods are known as the divine race. Although everyone knew this story, learned since childhood about the protective gods, Bai Yi no longer trusted the credibility of such accounts. Bai Yi, for his part, remained indifferent while the other students vied for a chance to accompany Lin Feng, arguing that, unlike the others, they were not commoners. However, Lin Feng clarified that the event had been organized by the Thebes family, and this time all classmates had been invited. Thus, all interested parties could attend the hunt. Bai Yi's classmates were incredulous at the possibility of visiting the divine race's territory. They knew it was a place restricted to nobles, and going there represented a great privilege. At that moment, Lin Feng asked if everyone could go together. The Thebes family's territory was, in fact, a high-tech floating city. Its inhabitants used to travel by flying vehicles, just as Lin Feng had done. The 5 divine families were spread across various regions, with the Shengyi nation predominantly inhabited by the Thebes family. They were all descendants of Cadmus Thebes, and currently led the most powerful army in the world, the Guild of Gods. Naturally, they also managed the Divine Weapon Academy. Consequently, the entire process of army selection and management was conducted by them. The awakened academies in various countries were also under their jurisdiction. Bai Yi thought he had attracted their attention due to his performance in the graduation exam, but he didn't understand why he had been approached specifically at the hunting competition. Lin Feng led the students during the visit to the location. While the other students were dazzled by the beauty of the place, Bai Yi only thought that he had finally reunited with the divine family, as it was not his first time there. Shortly after, a servant announces the arrival of visitors for Shin Thebes, the first heir in the line of succession. Shin Thebes reflects on art and ruins. His grandfather claimed that art was the only proof of human existence. His father, the king, believed that ruins were the true evidence. Shin, however, concludes that true art lies in creating ruins. Some students do not understand Shin's reasoning. The leader of the spoiled students instructs the others to show respect and bow, stating that only the ignorant face a deity directly. The protagonist, however, remains with his head held high. He realizes that Shin Thebes, the eldest son of the deity who governs that world, is before him, but he does not feel intimidated. After the presentation, Lin Feng leads the students to another location, the hunting grounds. Everyone is shocked by the immensity of the creatures that inhabit the place. Meanwhile, as Aod observes the hunt, and asks how many participants there will be this time, his brother, Ali Aod, replies that the announcement will be made soon. They are not the only nobles present. Others also watch the hunt, including a girl named Alice Jin. The protagonist knows them well, the twins, as Aod and Ali Aod are grandchildren of the Aod family, and Alice Jin is a granddaughter of the Jin family. This means that representatives from 3 divine families are on site, observing everything. Lin Feng announces that the competition will begin soon, and will present the rules so that everyone understands. The hunting competition takes place in this gigantic area. Its core is the confrontation between awakened and magical monsters. The monsters, all of rank C, are captured around the world and kept there by the Divine Guild. As for the awakened, they are volunteers from various regions. To ensure a fair challenge, only awakened of rank lower than B can participate. With this, the students understand that the participants possess a strength similar to theirs. Unlike the students, however, these volunteers are more courageous. Lin Feng announced that this year's hunting competition coincided with the festival day. For this reason, the Thebes family had prepared exceptionally generous rewards for the ultimate winner. He then invited the participants to enter the arena. Lin Feng informed them that this year there were a total of 12 participants, including Louis from the Shengdian Kingdom and Lin Qing from the Naiyi Kingdom. The younger students believed that these participants must possess vast experience, feeling inferior in terms of strength. However, the prospect of valuable rewards motivated some to take the risk despite the high level of danger. The protagonist, however, was the only one who showed no fear. At that moment, Shin Thebes noticed the protagonist and identified him as Bai Yi. Shin Thebes stated that he knew Bai Yi had single-handedly defeated a D-rank dungeon, but he believed Bai Yi was capable of even greater feats. He then challenged Bai Yi to defeat one of the C-rank monsters in front of everyone. The more privileged students considered it madness to have a mere student fight alone against a monster of that level, but the order came from a divine descendant. Meanwhile, he pondered that Bai Yi had not been invited without reason, believing that the Thebes family intended to test him from the beginning. For his part, Bai Yi declared that facing a single monster would not be enough. Since he was there, he would like to participate in the hunt completely. Although he didn't show it, Shin Thebes was surprised by the request. Not unlike him, the others were also shocked upon hearing Bai Yi's request. Even the nobles present were surprised. After all, it was not common to witness such audacity. Bai Yi thought that C-rank monsters were quite uncommon in the outside world, and having the opportunity to face them was something he did not want to miss. His goal was to reach B rank, and for that, he knew he would need to accept increasingly greater challenges. Furthermore, 3 of the divine guilds were present, about to witness his power. Thus, he wished to provide them with the greatest spectacle of their lives. He in turn, expressed his desire to participate in the hunt, should there still be available spots. Next, the vice captain also expressed interest in joining. Witnessing this scene, the spoiled students were shocked once again. Shin Thebes stated that since everyone's level was C rank, they technically met the requirements. He mentioned it was the first time ordinary students had requested to join the competition, and finding the situation interesting, he approved the request. At that moment, one of the spoiled students declared that those bumpkins were just trying to show off in front of the Divine Guild, predicting they wouldn't last long. Feeling threatened, the leader of the spoiled students announced that he would also participate. Lin Feng warned him to think carefully, explaining that teleportation devices were not allowed during the competition. Therefore, in a dangerous situation, no one would save him. Despite his fear, the leader of the spoiled students did not want to be left behind and agreed to participate in the competition. He believed that even without winning, his performance couldn't be worse than that of a bunch of bumpkins. With these additions, the number of participants increased by 8. These were the 5 from the private academy, plus the 3 from the Jiang Kingdom. From their privileged seats, the nobles considered that things had become more interesting. Then, the Jin family grandson asked the twins who they would bet on. The brothers each bet 1 million on the 5 from the private academy, claiming that nobles like them would never lose to inferior commoners. However, Shin Thebes spoke up, betting on Bai Yi's victory. The twins asked if he was serious. Regardless, they believed Shin Thebes was just throwing money away by betting on the wrong horse. Meanwhile, the Jin grandson pondered who he would bet on. Lin Feng realized he had forgotten to warn the new participants that it was absolutely forbidden to approach the central region of the Black Forest. However, he figured there was no cause for concern, as they probably wouldn't reach that far. Meanwhile, the participants spread out across the field. Drones filmed everything that happened inside. As soon as they moved a little distance away, the spoiled girl trembled with fear, claiming they were facing a danger never before seen. Their group leader instructed everyone not to panic, reminding them that they had faced monsters before, and that the current situation wouldn't be much different. The strength of a C-rank monster was not much superior to that of a dungeon boss, and he believed that if they fought as a group, their chances would be higher. This way, they would have the chance to put those bumpkins in their place. Sometime later, the protagonist and his group were advancing. Suddenly, he felt something peculiar. His heart started beating faster for no apparent reason, and he didn't understand why. He asked Bai Yi if he was all right. Bai Yi replied yes, so as not to worry the others. The vice captain reiterated that the best strategy would be to fight as a group. He added that ever since Bai Yi refused the offer to join the school guild, their leader had been having sleepless nights. For this reason, she was even more eager to cooperate with Bai Yi. In any case, the vice captain believed they would have nothing to lose by cooperating with each other. Meanwhile, a lurking monster attacked the other group of students. Calivan, the leader of the spoiled students, was startled. He realized the monster was easily reading their movements. Calivan and his group were at the enemy's mercy. However, one of the group members decided to attack with their sword, managing to wound the creature. Next, the group's mage attacked with ice, pushing the monster away from the others. The monster became frozen, turning into an easy target. The group's archer prepared to shoot. As she fired her arrow, the others attacked in close combat, sparing no effort to defeat the monster. The group leader threw a fireball, believing the enemy would have no way to escape. Upon being hit, the monster exploded from the impact of the fire, being fragmented by the blast. Calivan celebrated his group's first victory, stating that this was the true potential of an elite group. His team also celebrated the victory, although the points had only been credited to the leader. Calivan declared that with the help of his companions, he would eliminate the monsters, leaving the rear guard for them to handle. In the meantime, the group's mage noticed something. In the overall ranking, the protagonist's group had already defeated more than 10 monsters and was in the lead. The group's mage was astonished. Her group had just defeated the first monster, while the others were already far ahead in the rankings. Even her group's leader found it difficult to catch up to them. Not only he, but the nobles were also apprehensive. The twins, who had bet on the group of five's victory, now considered them a useless bunch. They could not comprehend the difficulty they faced in defeating simple commoners. They believed these beginners were just lucky. Coincidentally, the prince had randomly chosen the third-ranked participant. Shin Thebes, however, stated that it wasn't about luck, as his father had taught him never to underestimate the insects. Unlike the others, the fat man had not yet placed a bet. He questioned if that hunt wasn't easier than usual. If it continued like this until the end, it wouldn't be fun at all. Then Shin Thebes asked what the boy's outlandish idea would be this time. In turn, the Jin family's grandson stated that he would bet on himself, since he would also participate in the hunt. However, he declared that he would send his dog to the hunting grounds, as he wouldn't dirty his own hands. One of the twins observed that that dog was a divinely blessed creature and, according to the rules, only individuals below rank B could participate in the hunt. However, the fat man argued that the Divine Guild set the rules. He also suggested that they take advantage of the situation and release the high-level monsters that were imprisoned. If his dog didn't achieve first place, he would be the one to die in the end. It didn't take long for the stronger monsters to appear. The first ones to face them were surprised, as they did not expect such a turn of events. One of the participants withdrew from the competition and begged to leave. However, as previously warned, there was no rescue available for those within the hunting grounds. Thus, several participants were eliminated throughout the competition. Those who agreed to participate were at their own risk, but this did not prevent those on the outside from becoming worried, including Professor Huang, who was concerned about the protagonist. Unlike her, the nobles showed no concern whatsoever, for to them, it was all just mere entertainment. The twins applauded the spectacle, considering that the competition had become truly interesting. Next, they asked Thebes if he still had any monsters left. The prince, impassive, simply observed everything carefully. Back with the protagonist's group, Heelei was facing a stone monster. She used her speed to dodge the attacks. While Heelei distracted the creature, the protagonist seized the opportunity to attack, pushing the monster away with a kick. However, the creature had not yet been defeated. Nevertheless, it began to suffer disadvantages, as this was one of the Vice Leader's abilities. Taking advantage of the opening, the protagonist attacked again, defeating the monster once and for all. Heelei, in turn, realized that this was the third time Bai Yi had helped her. Although they were working as a team, in practice, it was Bai Yi who was in charge. Furthermore, he was only using one of his classes, leading Heelei to believe that he did not wish to fully reveal himself to everyone unnecessarily. The protagonist, for his part, reflected on his rapid evolution and the wisdom of accepting the challenge. He imagined that if he continued at this pace, he would soon reach the much-desired rank B. However, he needed to act cautiously, as he did not want to expose himself in front of so many cameras. To act unwatched, he concluded that it would be necessary to find a space away from everyone's sight. The mist forest ahead of him seemed to be the ideal location for what he was looking for. The protagonist, aware that he cannot expose himself, considers entering the forest as the best option. To do this, he needs to convince the rest of the team. The vice captain, in turn, states that the team is performing very well, occupying the top of the ranking. He highlights that the fourth-place contestant is far behind, further increasing the gap between them. However, Heelei notices something her companion did not. She reveals that a competitor is rapidly climbing the ranks. The protagonist knows Ganix, but questions the reason for his participation in the competition. He observes that Ganix is defeating powerful monsters alone. Ganix is a divine blessed, a B-rank cloud-type warrior, which gives him a great advantage against monsters. The fact that he is a subordinate of the Jin family does not diminish the strength of his powers. In a short time, Ganix reaches third place in the ranking, surpassing the protagonist. Witnessing this, the chubby guy celebrates, exclaiming that Ganix has surpassed Thebes' candidate. He adds that the prince bet on the wrong horse, and because of that, will lose the bet. One of the twins argues that having a divine blessed participate in his place is pure cheating. However, the other twin recalls that Thebes has never lost a bet until today, and expresses satisfaction in finally seeing him lose. The prince, in turn, declares that he will not change the person he is betting on. Instead, he raises the bet by 100 million and challenges the others to follow suit. The twins were shocked, protesting that the amount was insane, equivalent to a whole week's contribution. In contrast, the burly man declared that Ganix was the most loyal hunting dog he had ever trained, and he also raised his bet on Ganix's victory. Following this, Thebes announced that he would increase the participants' motivation, and to do so, he added extra time to the game. It was then announced that the final phase of the hunting competition would officially begin at that moment. This meant that more monsters would be released into the arena, and participants could decide whether to continue or withdraw. Immediately, one of the young participants declared her desire to withdraw. One of the drones announced that the Thebes family had added a new prize for the winner. The prize was a special item, the Sacred Oracle. Bai Yi knew that this item was a ring that each member of the Divine Guild could only bestow once in their entire lifetime. For an ordinary person, obtaining a Sacred Oracle was equivalent to possessing a guarantee of impunity. Even if they committed a capital crime, they could use the Sacred Oracle to obtain absolution. In his past life, Bai Yi had been saved by his master with an identical ring. Therefore, Bai Yi was surprised to learn that the Thebes family was betting so heavily on this competition. He believed that the competition would become even more intense, and because of this, he would have to strive to climb the ranks. Next, the vice captain observed that fighting as a team had a higher success rate, but points accumulated slowly, and the number of monsters was also decreasing. He suggested that each of them fight for themselves from that moment on, otherwise the three of them would be surpassed by the newcomer in the competition. In turn, Bai Yi asked if his companions would be able to manage on their own. Upon hearing this, He Li realized that Bai Yi had only agreed to fight with them because he was concerned about his companion's safety. Then, she told Bai Yi not to worry about it, and stated that she should not be underestimated, as she was also vying for first place. On the other side, Ganix was fighting with everything he had. After all, he knew what would happen if he lost the competition. Watching everything from a private box, his master stated that he had created a true hunting dog, and believed there was no way the prince's candidate could win the competition, as even Bai Yi's teammates had abandoned him. However, immediately afterward, Bai Yi looked at one of the drones, and the transmission went down. The prince was somewhat confused, as no one expected that to happen. However, Thebes imagined that Bai Yi would now truly use his real strength, and that was why he was hiding. The prince, who had been observing Bai Yi from the start, noticed that the young man intentionally headed towards the most central area of the forest, a place many avoided due to its dangers. Bai Yi, for his part, remembered his master's teachings. The forest's great monsters preferred to hide. To find the creatures that granted the most experience, he would need to enter the enemy's lair. Now that he was there, Bai Yi concluded that it would be best to seize the opportunity to maximize his level. Outside the arena, the students who had given up were following the events. They noticed that Bai Yi's transmission had disappeared, and some began to worry. Professor Huang, in particular, grew anxious, imagining that Bai Yi might be in danger. However, one of the students drew attention to Bai Yi's score. They realized that he had gained 30 points at once, rising to second place in the ranking. If he continued at this pace, it wouldn't take long for him to reach first place. Upon seeing this, the chubby guy was shocked. He hadn't expected his subordinate's score to be surpassed, and believed it could only be a system error. However, Lin Feng argued that this was impossible. He explained that chips were inserted into each monster, and the moment they were killed, the points were automatically attributed to whoever defeated them. Annoyed, the chubby guy threw a drink in Lin Feng's face, stating that he didn't need to explain what he already knew. He added that, even if he was a blessed one, Lin Feng didn't have the right to interrupt a noble while he was speaking. Thebes, for his part, commented that the chubby guy was just afraid of losing. He also thought that Bai Yi was more interesting than he had imagined. Inside the arena, He Li observed that, as predicted, Bai Yi had surpassed everyone by starting to fight alone. Even knowing that Bai Yi was hiding his true power, she didn't want to be left behind. At that moment, the vice captain noticed how quickly Bai Yi was evolving, and wondered how someone could climb the ranks so quickly. He began to speculate that Bai Yi had been hiding his strength from his team, and had now found an opportunity to demonstrate his power before the Divine Guild. The vice captain added that the most dangerous area of the forest should contain the most valuable monsters, and that Bai Yi had probably headed there. The vice captain decides that it would also be prudent to head to the central area, believing that by keeping his distance from the Black Mist Forest, he would be safe. However, Bai Yi was already in the heart of the Black Mist Forest. He reflected that, on his journey there, almost all the monsters in his path had been defeated. Thanks to this, his skills had evolved significantly, and he was considering the possibility of reaching rank B before leaving the hunting arena. Furthermore, Bai Yi had formed a contract with 2 more monsters. One of them was Shaolin, useful for locating nearby enemies, and the other, King Kong, a giant fighter. The protagonist took the opportunity to ask Shaolin to analyze the surroundings. Immediately, the protagonist was once again overcome by an unsettling feeling. He concluded that he was very close to imminent danger, as he felt something calling him. He recalled that, in the past, the demon who had made a pact with him had granted him a gift by sending him back to the past. However, the protagonist knew that such a gift came with a price. On that occasion, the demon had stated that, at the opportune moment, Bai Yi would pay his debt. Back in the present moment, the protagonist thought it was time to fulfill his part of the agreement. Elsewhere, Professor Huang analyzes the ranking board and sees Bai Yi in first place. She comments that among the top 4, 3 are from her school, and she did not expect such a result. Other observers also showed surprise. However, Bai Yi's transmission fails, preventing them from following his actions. The students begin to speculate that Bai Yi has advanced to the central region of the arena, the most dangerous part of the forest. The hunting ground is divided into 3 sections: the basic area, the central area, and the core, known as the Black Mist Forest. Most participants ventured only into the basic area, where monsters are weaker and yield fewer points. Unlike the majority, those in the higher ranking positions chose to explore the central area, which is why they accumulated so many points. Therefore, if Bai Yi is ahead of the others, it is likely that he has advanced even further into the forest's core. However, everyone knows that this area is forbidden, as rumors claim the place is cursed. Bai Yi's position remains uncertain, but the vice captain's is clear. Everyone can see him entering the forbidden forest. Meanwhile, the vice captain realizes he had inadvertently entered the forbidden forest. His intention was to remain only in the central area, where, however, he found no monsters. The vice captain notices he is not alone when he spots Bai Yi exploring the same environment. He wonders if Bai Yi is unaware of the danger. Still, the vice captain believes he can take advantage of the situation. He thinks that if Bai Yi disappears in a place like this, the god's attention will turn to others, like him. While the vice captain hesitates, Bai Yi ventures even deeper into the Black Mist Forest. However, Bai Yi realizes he has found one of his own markings and begins to suspect he is lost. Despite walking in a straight line, he realizes he has returned to his starting point. He then imagines he might be in an illusory labyrinth. Furthermore, he notices he is not the first to get lost there, indicating that a spell might have been cast in the past, making the location even more dangerous. Bai Yi, however, does not understand who could have been responsible for such a spell, which only intensifies his curiosity about the forbidden forest. Elsewhere, Hila noticed that Bai Yi's score had stagnated, while his opponent climbed the ranks, reaching first place. Shortly after, the vice leader appeared. Hila asked if he had found Bai Yi. The vice leader replied that he had found Bai Yi in the central area and had seen him entering deeper into the forest. Hila then wondered if Bai Yi had mistakenly entered the Black Mist Forest. Subsequently, Bai Yi's signal was lost, and he disappeared from the competition system. The students were alarmed because Bai Yi had vanished even from the ranking. Huang, in particular, began to fear the worst, although she hoped she was wrong. Inside the Black Mist Forest, Bai Yi thought it best to close his eyes and not succumb to any visual or auditory illusions. He decided to trust only his instincts and follow the rhythm of his heart. By doing so, he drew closer and closer to the end of the forest. Upon opening his eyes, Bai Yi noticed a huge abyss before him. He did not expect to find an abyss in the center of the forbidden forest, as there was no record of it in his past life. However, he supposed that the celestial city must be hiding something at the bottom of that immense abyss. So, along with his ally, he decided to investigate what lay at the bottom. Bai Yi reached the bottom of the abyss. However, he was confused by the scene unfolding before him. He believed that it could only be what remained of a great battle. Suddenly, he was surprised. A spirit manifested at the location. Furthermore, the spirit was a boss who used its powers to summon other allied spirits. The boss asked, "How dare someone invade my territory?" and declared that it would show no mercy to any invader. Hila, following the protagonist's tracks, found monsters already defeated by him. It was a clear sign that Bai Yi had indeed entered the forbidden forest. Hila realized that the defeated monsters had not posed any danger to the protagonist, which must have made him confident to proceed. The vice captain, for his part, thought it better to continue the hunt, as he did not believe Bai Yi was still alive. Hila, however, refused to accept this idea and stated that she would go after Bai Yi. She felt guilty for not having warned the protagonist about the true dangers of the Forbidden Forest, and therefore, she wanted to save him. The vice captain tried to convince her not to go. However, a thought began to emerge in his mind. The less competition, the better it would be for his plan to win the favor of the gods. Hila was seen entering the Forbidden Forest. The chubby guy observing her claimed that the girl must be an idiot for doing that. However, he stated that this only made things easier for him. After all, the direct competitors were walking towards their death. He declared that there was no way his dog would lose the competition, and the victory would be his. The twins, for their part, discussed what was in that forest and why it was considered cursed. However, they realized that the competition was about to end, and soon it wouldn't matter much. Inside the hunting ground, some were still trying to survive. A girl was receiving first aid. An ally encouraged her, telling her to hold on until midnight, as the competition would end and they could leave. The leader of the spoiled boys commented that although the organizers had given them the opportunity to give up, no exit door had been made available. He said they were lucky to find an empty place to hide, otherwise they wouldn't have lasted long. By this point, he no longer cared about the ranking or his score, as his only wish was to get out of there as soon as possible. He claimed that, unlike commoners, their lives were not mediocre, and that's why they needed to endure until the competition's final time. Then, it was announced that the final stage had ended. Immediately, they believed they could finally leave. However, the organizers informed them that the bonus stage would now begin, and the final boss would be released. Faced with this, the spoiled ones fell into despair, and everything worsened when an earthquake struck the area. Some cried in despair, because by this point they no longer cared about points or prizes. They just wanted to get out of there alive. The leader of the spoiled boys reacts with fury, demanding to leave immediately. He claims that no one in his group cares about the competition anymore. Everyone just wants to escape as soon as possible. After all, they are from noble families and should be treated as such. However, the leader is caught by surprise. The enemy strikes him, eliminating him instantly and draining his energy. This is the promised boss. Upon seeing their leader eliminated, the other boys are shocked. Furthermore, they realize they could be next, as they are facing a rank B boss. Even if they attack together, there's no way to defeat such a powerful enemy. Far from there, Bai Yi is also facing a dangerous monster. Unlike the spoiled boys, he fights alone against a legion of enemies. Bai Yi reflects that throughout the competition, his general levels increased and his combat classes strengthened. However, only one class had its attributes significantly raised. He still believes he is not strong enough to defeat a Class B monster. However, his advantage lies in possessing more than one class. The protagonist bets on his trump card to win, switching classes during the fight and utilizing various attributes to defeat the monster. However, the enemy's strength is considerably superior to his own. Even using more than one class, Bai Yi finds himself at a disadvantage against such a powerful adversary. Still, he does not give up fighting, as he believes that by hitting the monster's weak point, he will be able to defeat it. To do this, he distracts the enemy while using the King Kong ability to strike it. In this way, he manages to hit the monster where he intended, leaving it vulnerable to lethal attacks. By doing this, Bai Yi finally manages to narrow the power gap. Soon, with a decisive attack, he eliminates the enemy. Despite the difficulty, he wins, and, as a reward, has his general attributes increased. But his journey is not over yet, as he sees a locked gate in front of him and feels the need to open it to discover what lies on the other side. Subsequently, Bai Yi notices an accumulation of stellar element. This means a new class is about to awaken. Meanwhile, outside, some members of the divine class were discussing the secret of the celestial city. One of them mentioned hearing rumors that inside the central tower, there was a dungeon where countless monsters were imprisoned. His companion, skeptical, did not believe it, arguing that such a thing would be impossible in the floating city. Interrupting their conversation, the squad captain reprimanded them, reminding them that they were not allowed to stand around gossiping about such matters. Faced with the reprimand, the two soldiers flinched, visibly startled. The captain emphasized that their duty was to protect the city's eastern sector, and with the hunting competition underway, they could not afford to make mistakes. He added that, despite having been in the squad for 3 years, they still showed less common sense than a recruit. He then ordered them to learn from their colleague Chris, as he was, in fact, an exemplary soldier. Back to the protagonist, he had just awakened a new class, the Star Red Mage. Although he appreciated the new power, he was soon again overcome by that unsettling feeling. Realizing that the feeling was intensifying, the protagonist concluded that the source could only be beyond the gate. He then decided to open the passage. passage. He broke the chains that sealed the place, thus freeing the entrance. Upon entering, the protagonist encountered more chains and realized that indeed, something of great importance was imprisoned there. Magical chains bound a man, and magical padlocks sealed each link, ensuring the prisoner had no chance of escape. Noticing the protagonist's presence, the prisoner asked if the young man had been sent to humiliate him. In turn, the protagonist asked if the man was Samiel. Surprised, the man questioned how the young man knew his name. Bai Yi simply replied that he was there to save him. The prisoner could barely utter a word after what he heard. Suddenly, the door leading to the area closed by itself. Bai Yi felt a chill, but there was nothing he could do. To make matters worse, a sinister aura began to manifest in the surroundings. Immediately, the enemy warrior lord reappeared. Bai Yi was confused, as he was certain he had already defeated that enemy. Not only that, but soon after, 2 more enemies appeared in the area, tripling the difficulty of the challenge before him. Astonished, Bai Yi wondered how so many enemies had appeared all at once. However, he didn't have much time to reflect, as the enemies didn't hesitate and attacked him. One of them declared that anyone who invaded their territory deserved to be eliminated. Bai Yi realized that his situation had become extremely complicated. In turn, the prisoner began to laugh at the situation. He commented that Bai Yi had fought his way through, but in doing so, he ended up attracting everyone's attention simultaneously. Annoyed, Bai Yi asked what he needed to do to free him. The prisoner retorted that Bai Yi didn't even have the key, questioning how he intended to free him. Bai Yi didn't even know he needed a key, and this revelation was not at all encouraging. However, he noticed that one of the enemy's swords perfectly matched the lock, deducing that it would be the key. But to get the item, he would have to defeat the sword's owner, something he would prefer not to have to do. The prisoner claimed that Bai Yi understood things quickly. However, he considered Bai Yi quite arrogant for believing he could save him. After all, how could someone who could barely protect himself intend to free another person? Bai Yi explained that it was no coincidence that the divine race had organized a hunting competition, prohibiting access to this area and preventing the participation of rank B or higher awakened. Their plan was to hide what was inside that chamber, as they knew very well that a class C or lower awakened would never find the place and get out alive. Faced with this, the prisoner commented that Bai Yi had apparently already accepted his fate. However, Bai Yi stated that he would not give up now. He proposed a bet to the prisoner, claiming that if he managed to free him, the prisoner should obey him forever. And he asked if Demon King Samiel agreed with his conditions. In turn, Samiel realized that, despite everything, Bai Yi showed no sign of fear. Then, he declared that if Bai Yi truly managed to free him, he would accept any condition imposed by him. During the fight, one of the enemies manifests their power, striking the protagonist with their sword and causing a large explosion. The adversary uses a considerable amount of energy in their attacks, giving the protagonist no time to react. Faced with the situation, Bai Yi sees no other alternative but to call upon his ally. King Kong intervenes, helping the protagonist escape an imminent attack. Observing the scene, Samiel realizes that the boy is, in fact, a dual-class human. However, he knows that the protagonist is facing an army of dead souls, a battle difficult even for Samiel himself. It's no wonder such powerful enemies are there. After all, to protect a place like this, such a reaction force is expected. The protagonist feels this firsthand, as he is practically forced to confront the adversaries. In doing so, he can barely attack, remaining almost entirely on the defensive. Bai Yi notices that, besides being strong, the enemy masters the advanced skill of matter perception, which puts him at a clear disadvantage. The protagonist reflects that, even being at the top of rank C, facing so many B-class enemies is an excessive challenge. He decides to retreat instead of just defending, because even with his guard up, he continues to take damage. By this point, the protagonist is already considerably exhausted, which decreases his reaction speed. With this, he becomes vulnerable to attacks, but King Kong intervenes again. Realizing that King Kong will not last much longer, the protagonist orders his ally to retreat. By doing so, he removes his greatest asset from the field, now leaving him with few options. Bai Yi was aware that the enemies surpassed his power level. To eliminate just one of the warriors, he had exhausted all his strength. Now he faced 10 warriors and a general. Samiel, in turn, declared that, in the face of absolute power, the weak would have no hope. However, the protagonist retorted that the essence of that battle was not a matter of life or death, because in the end, whoever had the best strategy would win. With that, Bai Yi ordered his bird to attack. The winged ally launched projectiles from a distance, hitting the smaller enemies as they tried to protect their master. Next, Bai Yi ordered a new attack. While his bird took care of the smaller warriors, he himself advanced towards the general. As he approached, he attempted an attack using an ice strike. Bai Yi noticed an instant of hesitation in the enemies. He thought that the general's entire attention was focused on getting rid of the ice, which made him vulnerable to attacks. However, the protagonist did not try to eliminate the enemy. Instead, he focused only on disarming him, taking the general's sword. The general realized he was without his sword and tried to retrieve it, but Bai Yi moved the key away from the enemy before he could recover his weapon. Then, Bai Yi used the sword for its real purpose and sent the key towards the lock. Furthermore, he summoned King Kong, ordering him to use the key. However, Bai Yi's summon failed to get the sword because the enemy was faster than his ally and took back the key for himself. The protagonist was astonished to see that his plan had not worked. Not only that, but the general attacked King Kong again. This time, King Kong could not protect himself, and the summon was eliminated. The general had one less target and declared that below the abyss, the greatest despair was approaching. Upon seeing his summoned creature eliminated, Bai Yi found himself powerless. Now he had one less ally. Samiel stated that the young man had underestimated his adversaries and paid the price for it. He added that these undead were distinct from the other beasts Bai Yi had faced until then. They were the souls of ancient servants of the Demon King. All of them had once been Samiel's subordinates in life, and now served as the prison's defense mechanism. Bai Yi found himself at a complete disadvantage. He tried to resist in the only way possible, by dodging enemy attacks. After all, it was the only action left to him, as attacking them would be a waste of energy. Even so, Bai Yi refused to give up. He looked for an opening whenever possible. However, his attacks did not have the desired effect. Samiel acknowledged the young man's skill. However, he realized that the development of Bai Yi's class had already reached its limit. Nonetheless, he considered that, for a weak human, Bai Yi was certainly one of the best. However, he stated that the young man was alone against a powerful army, and no matter how skilled he was, there was no way to win that battle. At that moment, Bai Yi thought he had once had a team, but now he didn't need one. A flashback revealed that in the past, at the Divine Guild's headquarters, Bai Yi had said he wasn't used to going on raids with other people. His master argued that Bai Yi acted that way because he believed he was superior to others and that a team would only slow him down. However, he claimed that wasn't quite the case, and that he simply didn't like dealing with people much. However, his master stated that the two of them understood each other very well, and that his student was just making excuses. Bai Yi retorted that his master wasn't a good example. After all, it was his duty to get along with him. The master, however, revealed that he had handpicked an elite squad for Bai Yi to lead, believing his disciple should have friends. At first, Bai Yi believed it wouldn't work out, but after so many years together, they managed to get along until the bitter end. Back in the present, Bai Yi thought that ever since he had returned, he had never truly been alone. After all, he carried the hatred of his companions with him at all times. Then, he switched to his newly acquired class and used the powers of the Star Mage to alter the terrain around him. With this action, he gained a significant territorial advantage over his enemies. Bai Yi launches an attack against the enemies, employing his newly acquired skills. He takes advantage of the modified terrain to trap the 10 warriors. Thus, he creates a narrow corridor where only he and the enemy general can face each other. The protagonist reflects that he is already familiar with various classes. As he advances towards the enemy uses his sword to defend himself. However, Bai Yi does not slow down. On the contrary, he intentionally allows himself to be hit. With the impact, he realizes that the blow from a B-rank general is indeed brutal. He observes that an opponent can only break the ice depending on their weapon, but now he has placed the enemy in a situation where they cannot counterattack. Bai Yi activates his ice power, trapping the enemy as he had done before. This time, however, he successfully trapped the general. Witnessing the entire scene, the prisoner is impressed. He saw the boy use his skill to trap the other enemies, leaving only the sword wielder free. Then, he used himself as bait, allowing the enemy's weapon to hit him on purpose to shorten the distance. Although he is alone, the boy demonstrates great intelligence. Furthermore, Samiel realizes that the boy acts like a one-man army. In turn, the protagonist manages to take the enemy's sword, and now he possesses the key to free the prisoner. Immediately, Bai Yi throws the sword into the lock. However, the general does not remain inert. She declares that she will not allow this to happen and uses her strength to break free from the ice once more. Nevertheless, the sword is already fitted into the lock, and the liberation process begins immediately. At that moment, the Demon King states that the boy has truly managed to free him. With the liberation process already underway, the protagonist, Bai Yi, approached and reminded the Demon King of the promise made, demanding that he fulfill his conditions. Immediately, the Demon King advanced and captured Bai Yi. At the same time, the general's soldiers managed to free themselves, leaving Bai Yi in an unfavorable situation. However, Bai Yi declared that it was time for the prisoner to honor his part of the agreement and ordered Samiel to eliminate the entire undead army. Samiel responded that he would do so anyway, dispensing with the need for a second request. Next, the Demon King activated his powers, stating that he would not forgive any of the traitors. Samiel positioned himself before his former army and quickly began to attack them, one by one. His accumulated strength was unleashed against the reanimated soldiers, who had no chance to counterattack as they faced a far superior adversary. Samiel exterminated the soldiers in seconds and, shortly after, addressed the general. He moved Bai Yi out of harm's way and struck down the army's leader. Bai Yi realized that the Demon King's strength was enviable and merely watched as Samiel eliminated the enemies. Samiel declared that the others still hadn't understood that they couldn't defeat him. The remaining soldiers even tried to react, but they had no chance of victory as they were confronting an incomparably more powerful opponent. The Demon King stated that his former allies had made a mistake by betraying him and would now make them regret it. Samiel, the Demon King, vociferated against the soldiers, calling them ungrateful traitors. He unleashed his fury upon his opponents, granting them no chance to react. The Demon King reminded them that this place had been their home, but everything changed with the arrival of that group calling themselves a divine race. He stated that the situation would be different if his soldiers had remained by his side. However, instead of resisting, his allies chose to betray him. Thus, from loyal soldiers, they transformed into mere war dogs for the enemies. With fury, the Demon King asked his former allies if their decision had been worth it. In response, the general claimed that the army had made that decision to survive, as there was no way to win the war. However, the Demon King retorted that it was no excuse. After all, that did not change the fact that they had betrayed their king. The general did not disagree, and therefore expressed his desire to be eliminated forever. But the Demon King declared that he would not consider a traitor's request. He added that traitors like him did not deserve a quick elimination. Instead, he would give them an appropriate punishment. At that instant, Samiel attacked the general without mercy. The general pleaded to be eliminated until his request was finally granted. However, it was not the Demon King who delivered the mercy blow, but rather the protagonist. Then, Samiel stated that the boy had interrupted his revenge and asked who he thought he was. In his past life, the Demon King Belphegor requested Bai Yi's help to locate the other 6 demon monarchs. Bai Yi asked who these 6 were. Belphegor clarified that they were the other demon kings, and that when the time was right, the protagonist's new heart would sense the presence of these individuals. The demon kings harbored hatred for the gods, thus sharing a common goal with Bai Yi. In this way, after freeing them, the protagonist could turn them into his allies to annihilate the deities who dominated the world. On that occasion, Belphegor became excited at the mere prospect of his plan coming to fruition, stating that the gods would not be able to escape a joint attack. Once defeated, the world would no longer be dominated by the divine race. Back in the present, the protagonist Bai Yi explains that he demanded that the prisoner Samiel eliminate the enemies immediately after being defeated. However, instead, Samiel chose to toy with his targets. Faced with this behavior, Bai Yi felt compelled to put an end to the reanimated spirits once and for all. Furious, Samiel declared that the fact that Bai Yi had freed him did not mean they were on equal footing. However, the protagonist argued that the Demon King would not be able to leave on his own, as that tower served to suppress his powers. If Samiel wished to remain there forever, he should eliminate him at that very moment. Upon hearing this, even though he disliked the idea, Samiel recognized that Bai Yi was right. Then, the protagonist asked Samiel if he remembered Belphegor. The Demon King is surprised to hear that name. However, the protagonist reveals that his presence there is due to a condition imposed by Belphegor. Confused, Samiel asks how a mere human could know Belphegor. Bai Yi explains that his survival was guaranteed by Belphegor, who granted him a new heart. For this reason, he has an agreement to fulfill, and the first step was to free Samiel. Next, the Demon King inquires about the next step. The protagonist declares that he will cause a great commotion in the area. After this conversation, both leave the imprisonment chamber. Upon reaching the second level of the abyss, Samiel reveals that the city was originally his. He barely remembers how many years he remained imprisoned there. What he remembers is that after they discovered that habitat full of crystals and demonic power, the situation began to change drastically. This is because a group calling themselves the Divine Race invaded his territory with an army. While the demons were building their home, they were surprised and annihilated by the enemies. The territory was plundered, and the survivors were turned into slaves. Subsequently, the invaders converted the location into the Celestial City, divided into two levels. The upper level, exclusive to the Divine Race, is filled with luxury and pleasure. The lower level, however, imprisons all who tried to resist the divine revolution. Samiel and his followers were the first to be confined. To keep them captive, the enemies erected a barrier on the upper level, permanently sealing everyone on the lower level. Since then, the enslaved have worked tirelessly day after day to sustain the luxurious lives of the upper level inhabitants. Some are even used as a source of energy, having their souls literally sucked out. All of this serves to keep the city floating, at the expense of those who lost the war. After so much time in imprisonment, some have forgotten their own names and the lives they once had. Samiel comments that if the Divine Race hadn't been out of options against him, perhaps he would have suffered the same fate as the others. After hearing all of this, Bai Yi states that the floating city is, in fact, the most accurate portrayal of that world. Those at the top sit comfortably in the heights, watching over and enslaving the less fortunate, for among humans there is no true justice. However, he observes that if all the city's energy is concentrated underground, executing his plan becomes easier. He instructs the Demon King to free all the enslaved and destroy the energy furnace. Meanwhile, Bai Yi will return to the surface to destroy the barrier that imprisons the demons. However, Samiel argues that the boy is not strong enough to destroy the magic barrier. After all, not even he, the Demon King, possesses such power. Nevertheless, the protagonist states that he is not alone, for before entering there, he had prepared everything. Bai Yi declares that the moment he agreed to enter there, he had already planned to free the Demon King, and that is exactly what he will do. His plan is to demolish the city's main tower, which will open the necessary breach for the demons to reclaim their ancient home. Returning to the hunting mission, the group of privileged students is being overwhelmed by the final boss. They witness the fall of their leader, the first victim, which left them terrified. However, one of the young men tries to keep the group's morale up, stating that the only way for them to survive is by fighting together. Another boy, however, argues that this will not be enough. As a noble, he believes his duty is not to fight, but rather to command others to do so, and he regrets having accepted the mission, had he known it would end this way. He adds that this is no ordinary monster. Therefore, he will not stand by waiting to be the next one eliminated, nor will he continue in this tournament for mere pennies. Annoyed, the young man who had taken the lead replies that he is not there for mere pennies. He reveals that he is not there of his own free will. A flashback shows that, before the tournament began, the Divine Guild sought out the young man at his home, informing him that his wife had been selected to participate in the hunting competition. On that occasion, he explained that his wife had just given birth and was breastfeeding, and he offered to take her place. The Divine Guild member warned that disobeying a direct order was considered a grave sin, and questioned if he and his family were willing to face the consequences. Back in the present, the same young man states that the hunting competition is nothing more than a massacre orchestrated by the Divine Race for the entertainment of others. He concludes that everyone there is merely a toy for the gods. From the skybox, the corpulent man laughs at the participants, stating that they are amusing when overcome by fear. The twins agree with him, hoping that the boss eliminates all the weak ones, and they consider this to be the best hunting mission they have ever witnessed. Back in the fight, a woman desperately tries to hide from the monster, overwhelmed by an immense dread. She is the wife of the young man who was summoned for the competition, and both were forced to participate, even though she had just given birth. The young man tries to protect his wife from an imminent attack, but this action puts him in serious trouble. From a distance, someone launches an attack against the monster. However, this only makes it even more aggressive, and it throws the young man away with force. The wife, who was already terrified, now goes into deep shock, unable to move. Not only her, but one of the spoiled boys also tries to hide, terrified. Worried about the woman, the young man tries to resist, but his strength fails him. Incapacitated, he can barely move. However, another figure appears on the battlefield. It was Ganix, the same one who had attacked the monster moments before. He attacks again, using his ice powers to try and contain the creature. Upon seeing Ganix in action, the spoiled boy recognizes him as the top-ranked participant. He and the other spoiled boys believe they are now safe. However, Ganix declares that, from the moment they stepped onto that battlefield, everyone's fate was already sealed. He states that no one will leave there alive, because this is the game the gods enjoy. Ganix, using a communicator, hears his boss's voice on the other end, who questions who authorized him to spoil the noble's fun. In the skybox, one of the twins laments that, because of the Jin family's dog, the fun ended prematurely. But the fat man reveals he has an idea in mind and asks if they are ready for something even more thrilling. Through the communicator, he orders Ganix to immediately stop what he is doing. As punishment, he demands that Ganix eliminate the woman in front of all the other players. Back to the protagonist, he reveals his entire plan. At this moment, Samiel observes that Belphegor's chosen one is, in fact, quite interesting. He states that he promised the boy a condition, but has not yet fulfilled it. Therefore, Samiel declares that he will take the initiative, gifting the protagonist in advance as a form of gratitude for his liberation. The Demon King explains that the young man's heart can absorb all elemental forces. Thus, he injected into the protagonist all the power he had accumulated over the years. Immediately after this, the protagonist felt the force being absorbed. He acquired a new class and now possesses the power of lightning. In addition, Samiel gave the boy a ring, explaining that the item can be used as an infinite space storage. The ring also has an additional function. It houses a voice transmitter. Thus, if the boy shouts into the ring, Samiel will know his location. No matter where the young man is, Samiel will realize he is asking for help and will find him immediately. Samiel then revealed that his original name was Samiel, but now he is called Liu Yun. He changed his name after certain events, but only shares this information with the few people he trusts. The protagonist promised to keep the new name. However, the protagonist observed that they were running out of time. He announced that he would go up, and as soon as the barrier was destroyed, he instructed the Demon King to remove everyone present from the location immediately. Then, the protagonist called his bird and prepared to leave. Liu Yun promised that the next time they met, he would hold a celebratory feast. The protagonist accepted and flew away. Both were determined to fulfill this mission, and more than that, wanted to turn the gods' playground upside down. Back at the hunting ground, the young man was trying to convince Ganix to help his wife. Meanwhile, Ganix's boss was trying to force him to act in the opposite way. Ganix, in turn, took the communicator from his ear and broke it, refusing to obey the orders. He then instructed everyone to quickly withdraw from there, as he would try to buy time. Witnessing his subordinate's attitude, the chubby man became furious. Even the twins were incredulous at Ganix's rebellion. Subsequently, the chubby man declared that he would eliminate his dog as soon as he found him again. Shortly after, one of the twins noticed something unusual. He realized that Bai Yi's name had returned to the ranking, which indicated that the protagonist was still alive. Speaking of the protagonist, he had just emerged from the dark forest. He knew that from the beginning, this competition was nothing more than mere entertainment for the nobles. Whether demons or awakened ones were competing, everyone who entered that field were nothing more than pawns in the hands of the gods. However, he had discovered a way to balance the situation. He would make the nobles themselves also participate in this game. Bai Yi reflects that this world is like a vast forest. Once under the control of the gods, one never finds the right direction. In his previous life, he lived deceived by divine lies. Now, upon remembering, he recognizes the countless mistakes he made. Next, the protagonist locates the monster that serves as the source of evil energy for the forest mist. Its energy is then absorbed. This energy, as it spreads through the air, generates the vast illusions that permeate the forest. However, the protagonist states that this creature is just another one of the divine race's prisoners. The narrative then transitions to a flashback. In it, we see He Li, still a child, being woken by her brother. He woke her and asked her to follow him without question. Both hid inside a hiding spot, and the older brother asked his sister not to make any noise. Healy did not understand the situation until she heard a strange sound coming from outside the hiding spot and realized it was a monster. Furthermore, she saw her parents fallen on the ground, understanding that they were no longer among the living. The creature then approached the siblings' hiding spot, putting them in grave danger. Back in the present, Hilo wakes from the nightmare. The protagonist calms her, explaining that she had been affected by the forest mist, but was now safe. Still frightened, Hilo tries to assimilate what had happened, but the protagonist reassures her, stating that everything would soon come to an end. In the nobles box, surprise takes over as they see Bai Yi's name return. The twins find the turn of events amusing, as at the exact moment the Jin family's subordinate rebelled, their greatest rival returned to the game. Unlike them, the corpulent noble shows no satisfaction, feeling humiliated by all the events. Faced with this, he demands that Thebes release the demonic stimulant. The prince warns that the substance is too dangerous, and that a rank B lord, upon using it, could face severe consequences. However, the corpulent noble declares he does not care about the details, wishing only that everyone inside be eliminated once and for all. Thebes maintains his reluctance regarding this decision. The chubby man, furious, tries to persuade him to change his mind and even attempts to win the twins over to his side. The twins, finding the idea amusing, do not oppose the decision. In contrast, the chubby man's sister tries to dissuade him, but he completely ignores her. The chubby man claims to have the majority on his side and demands that Thebes provide the stimulant. Faced with the pressure, Prince Thebes declares that he will comply with the request. The chubby man then orders them to deactivate the ranking system. For him, points no longer matter. His only desire is to see chaos unfold. Soon after, the stimulant is dispersed into the air. Some of the players do not understand what is happening. However, the monster that was previously contained absorbs the stimulant present in the air. Quickly, it manages to free itself from the ice that imprisoned it. Thanks to the stimulants, it becomes much stronger. The boss, who was already powerful, becomes even more aggressive with this increase in strength. It begins to use the surrounding trees as a food source, sucking their energy. Not only it, but also the other monsters in the region are affected by the stimulant. Unlike the others, Ganix understands the situation exactly. He realizes that the nobles are trying to eliminate everyone inside the barrier. From the private box, the chubby man declares that this is the result of his dog's disobedience. He claims that his doormat should never have tried to escape his control, for being against him is the same as being against the gods. However, something unexpected surprises the nobles. The system announces that the divine barrier's security is failing, and that the protection will soon be deactivated. Frightened, the chubby man questions the reason for such an occurrence. Before any answer is given, the barrier system collapses, and the monsters imprisoned within it manage to escape. Immediately, the twins tremble with fear, ordering that the problem be resolved without delay. Even Prince Thebes, who is usually calm, becomes frightened, imagining that someone destroyed the celestial city's protection. The boss, who was previously contained by the barrier, now finds a more interesting target. It dangerously approaches the chubby man, leaving him terrified. In order for the celestial city to float, a complex energy system was designed to power its thrusters. Essentially, an underground furnace was built, powered by crystals mined in the region. A second backup storage system maintains enough energy to keep the city airborne for at least a month. Thus, should the main energy system fail, the backup ensures continued operation. In this way, the city was designed to float indefinitely. The responsible engineer had promised that, even under attack from invaders, the city would have guaranteed power to remain operational. At that time, the king had declared such a scenario unlikely, as no one would dare attack the divine city. Therefore, the city would have no reason to worry. Now, in the present, the nobles realized their city was not as safe as they had imagined. The prince noticed that the barrier had failed, a clear sign that the main energy furnace had been destroyed. However, he did not know who would be capable of such a feat. The prince, however, was unaware that the demon king had been freed and was orchestrating a rebellion underground. The rebellion leader confirmed the furnace's destruction, delegating the rest of the task to his allies. The moment the main furnace was deactivated, the backup power source was automatically activated. Consequently, the protective barrier resumed operation. The nobles, who had previously trembled in fear, felt a brief relief, believing it had all been just a scare. Shortly after, however, the backup power source was also destroyed, and the devices keeping the city afloat ceased to function. Those in the lower sections of the city watched the upper cabins plummet. As soon as the cabins impacted the ground, the chubby man, in a panic, questioned what was happening with the city's power. Thebes, in turn, pondered that it was no mere coincidence, concluding that someone had deliberately destroyed both power sources of the celestial city. In the city center, the tower that supported the backup power had its structure severely shaken. The guardians of the location were unable to prevent the attack. This was because the one responsible for the destruction was, precisely, a monster with the ability to absorb energy, the same monster that the protagonist had previously captured and turned into one of his allies. After absorbing all the energy, the monster left the city's reserve completely depleted and notified its master that the order had been executed perfectly. Bai Yi received the message. However, he knew that this was just the beginning of the plan. Frightened, He Lu asked what had happened while she was unconscious. She observed the agitated monsters and realized that the situation had completely spiraled out of control. Not only she, but the other players also noticed the change. They realized that the barrier had disappeared, which finally allowed them to leave that place. However, they were not the only ones. The monsters could also cross the barrier with ease. The chubby guy ordered a divine squad to be deployed to defend them. Meanwhile, he himself was trying to escape from a monster that was chasing him and demanded that someone take action. In turn, the twins hid, hoping that their bodyguards would protect their lives. The nobles relied on servants to protect them. The prince, in turn, had Lin Feng by his side. Thebes stated that, given what he saw, he perceived only one possibility. After so long, someone had the audacity to rebel against the divine race. Next, the noble's servants managed to chain the monster. The chubby guy ordered them not to kill the monster yet, as he wished to punish it for trying to devour him. To do this, they used electric shocks to try to keep the creature under control. Meanwhile, the protagonist was taking advantage of the distraction. He imagined they were powerful monsters or arrogant humans. Anyone who fell into the hands of the Jin family's grandson ended up becoming a mere toy. Bai Yi believed that the chubby guy was the perfect reflection of the ignorance and cruelty of the divine race. So he decided to balance things. With a single attack, he eliminated the final boss and declared that finally the game had a winner. Annoyed, the chubby guy asked who had given Bai Yi permission to kill his new pet. While the chubby guy was trying to reprimand the protagonist, the floating city began to lose altitude. The nobles were frightened. The prince, in turn, noticed that perhaps this was not just a rebellion. In a way, he was not wrong, as no one expected the supporting pillars to be destroyed with such ease. To the nobles' despair, everything began to crumble. The prince, on the other hand, was trying to understand if that was truly the work of rebels. Next, the demon king Liu Yun emerged from the abyss in dragon form, bringing his allies with him. In this way, he practically declared war against the gods' dominion.